When your boss grabs your hand in a supermarket aisle and begs you to be her boyfriend or lose everything, you have exactly 3 seconds to decide if you're brave or stupid. That's what happened to Lucas Warren, a single dad just trying to buy milk and diapers on a Wednesday night. One moment he's checking prices. The next, Chicago's most powerful CEO is trembling against him, whispering desperate lies to save them both. What started as a panicked favor became a dangerous game of pretend, one that would cost them everything they'd built and give them everything they never knew they needed. Stay until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The fluorescent lights of Morrison's supermarket hummed their tired electric song, casting everything in that particular shade of exhausted white that made 9 p.m. on a Wednesday feel like 3 a.m. in your soul. Lucas Warren stood in the dairy aisle, one hand on his shopping cart, the other rubbing the bridge of his nose where a headache had been building since approximately 2:47 that afternoon, right around the time his son's school had called about the forgotten science project. Organic whole milk, 2%, or the store brand that's probably just sadness in a plastic jug, he muttered to himself, performing the mental mathematics that had become second nature over the past 3 years. Rent was due in 5 days. Tommy needed new shoes because 6-year-olds apparently grew feet at an alarming rate. The car was making that sound again, the expensive sound. He reached for the store brand. Lucas Warren was 32 years old, though some mornings he felt 60 and others he felt 12. He had the kind of face that women at the office called kind, which he'd learned was code for pleasant but forgettable. Brown hair that never quite cooperated, gray eyes that Tommy had inherited, and a jawline that suggested he'd been athletic once, before life had required him to choose between the gym and sleep had won every single time. 3 years ago, his wife Sarah had left. Not for another man, not for another life. She'd simply left for herself, she'd said. Needed to find out who she really was outside of being a mother and wife. She sent birthday cards to Tommy from various locations, Colorado, Oregon, somewhere in Northern California last he'd heard. Each one signed with love but offering nothing concrete, no return address, no phone number that stayed active for more than a few months. So Lucas had become both mother and father, breadwinner and homemaker, the person who packed lunches and attended parent-teacher conferences and somehow, impossibly, held down a job as a financial analyst at Cross Enterprises while keeping a 6-year-old alive and relatively happy. It was, in a word, exhausting. In several words, it was the most terrifying, overwhelming, occasionally beautiful thing he'd ever done. "Excuse me." The voice came from behind him, soft, almost uncertain, which was strange because uncertainty didn't usually shop at Morrison's at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday. Lucas moved his cart slightly to the left, assuming someone needed to get past him to the yogurt. "Lucas Warren?" He turned, and his heart performed an acrobatic maneuver that would have impressed the Cirque du Soleil. Evelyn Cross stood 3 feet away from him, and she was absolutely the last person he'd expected to encounter between the cottage cheese and the cream. His boss's boss's boss. The CEO of Cross Enterprises. The woman whose signature appeared on company-wide emails and whose face graced the business section of the Tribune at least once a month. The person who occupied an office on the 42nd floor that Lucas had only seen once, during the company orientation 3 years ago, and who existed in his professional life as more concept than person. Except here she was, decidedly a person, wearing jeans, and a simple black sweater, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders, instead of pulled back in the severe bun she wore in every professional photograph. She looked younger than the 41 years he knew her to be from the company website. She also looked terrified. "Ms. Cross," Lucas heard himself say, his brain struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the ice queen of corporate legend. Is everything okay?" She glanced over her shoulder, a quick jerky movement that made something in Lucas's chest tighten with protective instinct he didn't understand. When she looked back at him, her green eyes, he'd never been close enough to know they were green, were wide with something that looked remarkably like panic. "I need you to do something for me," she said, her voice low and urgent, something that's going to sound absolutely insane. Lucas waited, cart handle still gripped in his hand like an anchor to normalcy. "There's a man about to come around that corner," Evelyn continued, speaking quickly now, words tumbling over each other. Tall gray suit, even though it's 9 at night because he's pathological about appearances. He's my ex-husband, and he's been following me for the past 20 minutes, and She stopped, swallowed hard. I need him to think I've moved on, that I'm with someone, that I'm not... Not what? Lucas asked gently, though his pulse was hammering now. Not alone, she whispered, and the raw vulnerability in those 2 words cracked something open in his chest. Lucas had approximately 1.5 seconds to make a decision that would alter the trajectory of his life, though he didn't know that yet. What he knew was this. The most powerful woman in his professional world was standing in a supermarket dairy aisle, looking fragile and frightened, and every instinct he'd honed as a father, every protective impulse that had kept Tommy safe and whole, was screaming at him to help her. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. The relief that flooded her face was almost painful to witness. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that didn't belong in Morrison's at all. "Just stand next to me. Maybe put your arm around me. Make it look like we're together, like you're my boyfriend," Lucas finished, the word feeling strange and enormous in his mouth. "Yes," Evelyn breathed. "Please, just for a few minutes. I know it's asking too much. I know you don't even know me, but I'm desperate, and you're here, and you have kind eyes, and I just need..." "Evelyn." The male voice cut through her explanation like a blade through silk, and Lucas watched his CEO transform. Her spine straightened, her expression cooled. Every trace of vulnerability vanished behind a mask of professional courtesy that was somehow more frightening than her fear had been. Lucas turned to see the man approaching and understood immediately why Evelyn had looked terrified. Marcus Cross. Lucas remembered the name from a business article he'd skimmed months ago. Something about a divorce settlement that had made headlines was exactly as Evelyn had described. Tall, impeccably dressed despite the hour, with silver hair that suggested distinguished authority and ice blue eyes that suggested absolutely nothing warm at all. He moved through the supermarket like he owned it, like he owned everything, with the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no in any meaningful way. "Fancy meeting you here," Marcus said, his voice smooth and pleasant in a way that made Lucas's skin crawl. "I thought you only ate at Michelin-starred restaurants these days." "People do need groceries occasionally, Marcus," Evelyn replied, her tone perfectly neutral, perfectly controlled, but Lucas could see her hand trembling slightly at her side. Without thinking, or rather, thinking only about the fear he'd seen in her eyes moments before, Lucas did something that would have seemed impossible 5 minutes ago. He stepped close to Evelyn and slid his arm around her waist, pulling her gently against his side. She fit there perfectly, which was absurd and irrelevant, and somehow the only thing his brain could focus on for a brief, stupid moment. "Hi," Lucas said to Marcus, manufacturing a smile that felt like it might crack his face. "I don't think we've met. I'm Lucas." Marcus's eyes sharpened, cataloging Lucas with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock or furniture. Lucas fought the urge to check if he had a price tag somewhere on his person. "Marcus Cross," the man said, extending a hand that Lucas shook because refusing would have been strange, even though the contact felt like touching something dead. "And you are?" "My boyfriend," Evelyn said, and Lucas felt her lean into him slightly, a movement so subtle he might have imagined it, except for the way her body was radiating tension like heat. "We were just doing some shopping before heading back to his place." The lie hung in the air between them, shimmering and fragile. Marcus smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes at all. "Boyfriend? How unexpected. I wasn't aware you were seeing anyone, Evelyn. You usually announce your conquests at shareholder meetings." "Not a conquest," Lucas heard himself say, surprising everyone, including himself. "Just a relationship. You know, that thing where 2 people actually like each other." Evelyn's fingers gripped his side. A warning or a thank you, he couldn't tell. Marcus's expression flickered with something dark and dangerous. "And how long has this been going on?" "A few months," Evelyn answered smoothly, though Lucas could feel her heart racing against his ribs. "We've been keeping it quiet. You know how the office gossip can be." "The office," Marcus repeated slowly. "So you work at Cross Enterprises, Lucas?" This was it. This was where the lie would crumble. because Marcus could easily verify that Lucas Warren, financial analyst on the 23rd floor, had no business being anywhere near the CEO's personal life. Lucas's job, his stability, Tommy's security, everything was suddenly balanced on the edge of this moment. "I do," Lucas said, meeting Marcus's eyes directly. "Financial analysis division. Not the most glamorous department, but I like numbers. They make sense in ways people usually don't." It wasn't an answer to the unspoken question, how does a mid-level analyst end up dating the CEO? But it was honest, and honesty was the only thing Lucas had left to weaponize. Marcus studied him for a long moment, and Lucas forced himself to hold the man's gaze, to not look away, to keep his arm steady around Evelyn, even though every nerve in his body was screaming at him to run. "Financial analysis," Marcus finally said. "How practical." Evelyn always did have a weakness for projects. Things she could fix, people she could improve. His smile turned cruel. "I suppose I should warn you, she gets bored easily. Once the challenge is gone, so is her interest." Lucas felt Evelyn stiffen against him, and something hot and protective flared in his chest, the same thing he felt when other kids were mean to Tommy on the playground, magnified by about 1,000. "Good thing I'm interesting then," Lucas said mildly. "And not a project, just a person, which might be a new experience for both of us." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Then Evelyn laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine, and the sound of it seemed to shift something fundamental in the air between them. "We should finish shopping," she said, looking up at Lucas with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Tommy needs his cereal in the morning, and you know how he gets when breakfast isn't right." Tommy, his son. She'd just woven his actual life into this fiction, made it real in a way that should have terrified him, but instead felt almost like a gift, acknowledgement that he existed beyond this moment, beyond this lie. "Right," Lucas said, though his mind was reeling. "Can't mess with the breakfast routine." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You have a child." "He has a wonderful son," Evelyn said, and there was something fierce in her voice now, something protective that mirrored what Lucas had felt moments ago. "Smart, funny, 6 years old. Reminds me that there are good people in the world raising good children." The implication hung heavy and sharp. "Unlike you." Marcus's expression went very still, very cold. How domestic, how quaint. He looked at Evelyn with something that might have been pity or might have been possession. Lucas couldn't tell and didn't want to. "When this ends badly, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. You're not built for normal, Evelyn. You're built for power, and power requires sacrifice. We both know what you're willing to sacrifice." Before either of them could respond, Marcus turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor with the precise rhythm of a countdown timer. For a long moment, neither Lucas nor Evelyn moved. They stood frozen in their artificial embrace, two strangers playing at intimacy in the dairy aisle of a Chicago supermarket, while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and someone's abandoned cart squeaked past them toward the checkout. Then Evelyn stepped back, and the absence of her warmth left Lucas feeling strangely bereft. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, her professional mask slipping back into place even as her hands shook. "That was completely inappropriate. I put you in an impossible position. I used you without your consent. "Stop," Lucas said gently. "You asked. I chose. There's a difference." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Lucas had the sudden sense of being seen in a way he hadn't been in years. Not assessed or evaluated or cataloged, but seen, recognized as a person rather than a function. "Why did you help me?" Evelyn asked quietly. "You don't know me. I could cost you your job with a single email. I could make your life very difficult." Lucas thought about that for a moment, about the real answer beneath the polite one. "Because you looked scared," he finally said. "And I know what it's like to feel cornered by someone who's supposed to love you, but doesn't really see you as a person. My ex-wife didn't follow me around supermarkets, but she did make me feel like I was never quite enough, like I was a project that failed. So when you needed someone to just be there, I understood that." Evelyn's eyes shone with something that might have been tears, though she blinked them away quickly. "Thank you," she whispered, Truly. And I promise this won't affect your job. What happened here stays here. You have my word. Lucas nodded, though something in his chest ached with disappointment he didn't want to examine. Of course, this was the end of it. Of course, the CEO of Cross Enterprises and the single dad financial analyst didn't have anything in common beyond a shared moment of desperation in a supermarket dairy aisle. I should finish shopping, he said, gesturing vaguely at his cart. Morning comes early when you have a 6-year-old. Of course, Evelyn said, taking a step back, creating professional distance. But she hesitated, biting her lower lip in a gesture that seemed utterly at odds with her corporate persona. Lucas, can I ask you something? Sure. What you said to Marcus about liking numbers because they make sense when people don't. She paused. Do you really believe that? Lucas considered the question, thought about spreadsheets and financial models, and the clean certainty of mathematics versus the messy chaos of human emotion. Most days, he admitted, though my son is teaching me that people can make sense too if you pay attention to the right things. He's got his own logic. It's just different from adult logic, more honest, maybe. Evelyn smiled, and it transformed her entire face, made her look young and wistful and achingly human. He sounds wonderful. He is, Lucas said simply, because there were no adequate words for Tommy, for the way that child had saved him when Sarah left, given him purpose when everything else felt meaningless. You're a good father, Evelyn said softly. I can tell. The way you talk about him, the cereal in your cart, the fact that you're here at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night making sure he has what he needs for tomorrow. She glanced down at her own empty hands. He's lucky to have you. Something in the way she said it made Lucas think she was talking about more than just Tommy, about having someone who showed up, who paid attention, who put your needs above their convenience. Ms. Cross. Evelyn, she interrupted, after you've pretended to be my boyfriend in a supermarket, I think we can use first names. Lucas smiled despite himself. Evelyn, are you going to be okay? With your ex-husband, I mean. Is he dangerous? She considered the question carefully. Not physically. Marcus fights with lawyers and money and social pressure. He's contesting the divorce settlement, trying to claw back some of the company shares I was awarded. He thinks if he can prove I'm unstable or making poor decisions, like dating an employee, for instance, he can leverage that in court. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Tonight he was probably hoping to catch me alone, looking pathetic, so he could play the concerned ex-husband worried about my well-being. You disrupted that narrative beautifully. Glad I could help, Lucas said. Then, because the protective instinct hadn't quite faded. But seriously, if he escalates, if you need anything, I have excellent lawyers, Evelyn assured him, and security, and resources most people can't imagine. What I don't have is... She trailed off, shook her head. Never mind, this isn't your problem. What don't you have? Lucas asked gently. Evelyn met his eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, he saw past the CEO, past the Ice Queen, past all the armor she wore to survive in a world that demanded she be harder than diamonds and twice as flawless. Someone who looks at me like I'm a person worth protecting instead of an asset worth acquiring, she said quietly. But that's not something you can buy or negotiate or schedule on a calendar, so I make do. Lucas's heart cracked open just a little bit more. For what it's worth, he said, you seem pretty worth protecting to me. Person-wise, I mean. Not asset-wise. I'm terrible at financial assessments of human beings. Evelyn laughed, really laughed, and the sound was so unexpected and genuine that an elderly woman 2 aisles over turned to look. You're very kind, Lucas Warren, Evelyn said, and there was something wondering in her voice, like kindness was a foreign language she'd nearly forgotten. Your son is lucky. Your future partner will be lucky. I hope you know that. Currently, my future partner is asleep, Lucas said. We have a very committed relationship. Sometimes we even see each other for 6 consecutive hours. The dream, Evelyn said wryly. Then she glanced at her watch, elegant, expensive, probably worth more than Lucas's car, and sighed. I should go. I've taken enough of your evening, and I'm sure you need to get home. Yeah, Lucas agreed, though he felt strangely reluctant to end this conversation, this strange pocket of honesty they'd created between the dairy and frozen foods. Good luck with everything, the lawyers and the ex-husband and the corporation and all of it. Thank you, Evelyn said. She hesitated one more moment, then made a decision that Lucas could see cross her face like weather. This is probably inappropriate, but if you ever need anything, a reference, a recommendation, help with Tommy's college fund in 18 years. You have an ally on the 42nd floor for what that's worth. It was worth more than she knew, but Lucas just nodded. I appreciate that. Evelyn smiled one last time, soft and sad and real. And then she walked away, disappearing around the corner toward the produce section, leaving Lucas alone with his cart and his store-brand milk and the rapidly cooling sense that something significant had just happened. He stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of the past 10 minutes, trying to reconcile the woman he'd just met with the corporate legend he'd known only from a distance, trying to understand why his heart was still racing, why his skin still felt warm where she'd leaned against him, why he felt like he'd just stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to discover if he'd fall or fly. Get it together, he muttered to himself. She's your boss's boss's boss. This was a one-time thing, a moment, nothing more. But as he finished his shopping, grabbing Tommy's favorite cereal, the chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, the applesauce pouches that made lunch packing easier, Lucas couldn't quite shake the memory of Evelyn's voice when she'd said he had kind eyes, or the way she'd fit against his side like she belonged there, or the fierce protectiveness he'd felt when Marcus had tried to diminish her. He paid for his groceries, loaded them into his aging Honda Civic, drove through the quiet Chicago streets toward the small apartment he shared with Tommy. The whole time his mind kept replaying the encounter, examining it from different angles like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. At home, he found Mrs. Chen from next door reading on his couch, while Tommy slept peacefully in his bedroom, small body curled around his stuffed elephant like it held all the secrets of the universe. Any trouble? Lucas asked quietly as Mrs. Chen gathered her things. Perfect angel, as always, she said, smiling. He told me about his science project, something about volcanoes? Volcanoes, Lucas confirmed, handing her the $20 he could barely afford but always provided because good babysitters were worth their weight in gold. Thanks again, Mrs. Chen. I owe you. Nonsense, she said, patting his arm with her small, weathered hand. You're a good boy, Lucas, a good father. Someone should take care of you for a change. After she left, Lucas put away the groceries, checked on Tommy one more time. The boy had Sarah's nose and Lucas's stubborn cowlick, and seeing him peaceful in sleep always made Lucas's chest ache with fierce, protective love, and finally collapsed into his own bed. He should have fallen asleep immediately. His body was exhausted, his mind overwhelmed by the usual 1,000 worries about money and parenting and whether he was completely screwing up the whole single dad thing. Instead, he lay awake in the darkness, thinking about green eyes and genuine laughter and the way Evelyn Cross had looked when she'd called herself not worth protecting, thinking about the lies they'd told that had felt more honest than most truths, thinking about what it meant that he'd stepped into her fiction without hesitation, that some part of him had wanted to be her boyfriend, her protector, her person, even if only for the length of a supermarket encounter. You're being ridiculous, Lucas told the ceiling. She's a CEO. You're a single dad who shops at Morrison's and considers 8 hours of sleep a fantasy. You exist in completely different universes. But the thing about universes, Lucas thought as he finally drifted toward sleep, was that sometimes they collided in unexpected ways. Sometimes a moment in a dairy aisle could shift the trajectory of everything that came after. Sometimes the lies you told became the truths you needed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you pretended to be was closer to who you really were than you'd ever imagined. The email arrived at 6:47 the next morning, which was impressive considering Lucas had been awake since 6:15, making Tommy's lunch and trying to convince a 6-year-old that, yes, socks were a non-negotiable part of the school dress code. But Dad, my feet don't feel like socks today, Tommy explained with the kind of irrefutable logic that only small children possessed. Your feet don't get a vote, Lucas replied, spreading peanut butter on whole wheat bread with the efficiency of long practice. Democracy ends at the ankles in this house. Tommy giggled, which meant Lucas had won this particular battle, and was pulling on his Superman socks when Lucas's phone chimed with the incoming message. He almost didn't check it. Morning emails were usually automated reminders about staff meetings or building maintenance, nothing that required immediate attention. But something made him glance at the screen, and his heart performed that same acrobatic maneuver it had executed in the supermarket when he saw the sender's name, Evelyn Cross. His finger hovered over the notification for a solid 3 seconds before Tommy's voice broke through his paralysis. "Dad? You okay? You look weird." "I'm fine, buddy," Lucas managed, forcing his attention back to lunch-making even as his pulse hammered. "Just remembered something I need to do at work." The email stayed unopened through the rest of the morning routine, through breakfast and toothbrushing and the minor crisis when Tommy couldn't find his library book and they had to tear apart the apartment before discovering it wedged behind the couch cushions. It stayed unopened during the drive to Tommy's school, through the kiss and hug goodbye ritual they performed every morning, through Lucas's promise that yes, he would definitely remember to pick up poster board for the volcano project after work. It wasn't until Lucas was sitting in his cubicle on the 23rd floor of Cross Enterprises, surrounded by the ambient noise of keyboards and coffee makers, and Jason from accounting explaining his fantasy football strategy to anyone who would listen, that he finally opened the message. The subject line read simply, "Thank you." Lucas took a breath and clicked. "Lucas, I wanted to reach out personally to thank you for your help last night. What you did, stepping in without question, protecting a virtual stranger from an uncomfortable situation, showed a kindness that's rare in my world. Rarer than it should be. I meant what I said about this not affecting your position at the company. You have my word that last night stays between us, and your career trajectory will continue to be based solely on your merit and performance. However, I do have one additional request, and I'll understand completely if you decline. In fact, I expect you to decline because what I'm about to ask is unreasonable and potentially problematic, and definitely crosses several professional boundaries. There's a corporate gala this Saturday night. The Anderson Foundation benefit. You may have seen the company-wide email about it. It's one of those events where Chicago's business elite gather to write large checks and network while pretending to care about childhood literacy. I'm required to attend, and Marcus will definitely be there with his new legal team, using the event as an opportunity to paint me as isolated and unstable. I need a date. More specifically, I need the boyfriend I invented in a supermarket dairy aisle to make a public appearance just for one evening, to show Marcus and his lawyers that I've moved on, that I'm perfectly stable and happy and not the lonely, desperate woman they're trying to portray in court. I know this is asking too much. You have a son, a life, responsibilities that don't include play acting for your CEO's benefit. But I'm asking anyway because last night you made me feel safe for the first time in months, and I'm desperate enough to risk your refusal. If you agree, I'll handle all the logistics. Formal wear rental, transportation, a generous bonus that has nothing to do with this request, and everything to do with the overtime financial analysis has been putting in this quarter. If you decline, this email never happened, and we never speak of it again. Either way, thank you again for last night. Evelyn Lucas read the email 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of complexity he wasn't sure how to process. The careful professionalism masking obvious vulnerability, the acknowledgement that she was asking too much paired with the courage to ask anyway, the way she'd called him kind, like it was something rare and valuable instead of just basic human decency. He should say no. Any rational person would say no. Getting further entangled with Evelyn Cross was asking for complications he absolutely didn't need in his carefully balanced life. Besides, what did he know about corporate galas? He owned exactly one suit, purchased for Sarah's cousin's wedding 4 years ago, and it probably didn't fit anymore. He couldn't make small talk with business elite. He could barely make small talk with the other parents at Tommy's school. This was a terrible idea. Lucas hit reply before he could talk himself out of it. "Miss Cross, I'll do it. Just tell me when and where, and what I need to know so I don't accidentally embarrass you in front of Chicago's finest. One condition, though, no bonus. If I'm doing this, it's not for money. It's because you asked, and because everyone deserves someone in their corner, even at fancy galas I definitely don't belong at. Lucas." He sent the email before he could second-guess himself, then immediately wanted to recall it because what the hell was he thinking? But the message was gone, launched into the digital void, and all Lucas could do was stare at his computer screen and wonder if he'd just made the best or worst decision of his adult life. The response came 47 minutes later. "Lucas, thank you. Truly. I'll have my assistant send over the details. And you're wrong about one thing. You belong anywhere you choose to be. It's the rest of us who have to earn the right to your company. E. Lucas read that last line 6 times, trying to decode the meaning beneath the words, trying to understand how Evelyn Cross could make him feel simultaneously terrified and valued with a single sentence. Hey, Warren. Lucas looked up to find Daniel Martinez leaning against his cubicle wall, coffee in hand, expression curious. Daniel was one of the few people on the 23rd floor Lucas actually considered a friend, a fellow analyst who understood the particular stress of balancing demanding work with small children at home. You look weird, Daniel observed. Good weird or bad weird? I'm not sure yet, Lucas admitted. Possibly both? Daniel raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. Everything okay with Tommy? Tommy's fine. This is something else. Lucas hesitated, then figured he might as well practice his cover story now. I kind of have a date this Saturday. Daniel's eyes widened. A date? Lucas Warren, single dad extraordinaire, has a date. Alert the media. Call the Times. This is front page news. Shut up, Lucas said, but he was smiling despite himself. It's just dinner. A benefit thing. Nothing major. Nothing major? Daniel repeated slowly. You haven't been on a date since Sarah left. This is extremely major. Who is she? How'd you meet? Do we need to have the talk about not mentioning your ex-wife within the first 20 minutes? Lucas thought about how to answer, about the lies he was going to have to tell, and the truths he'd have to hide. Her name's Evelyn. We met recently. She's kind of amazing, actually. Smart and strong and a little scary in the best way. It was all true, which somehow made the deception easier. And she asked you to a benefit dinner? Daniel looked impressed. Damn, Warren, you've been holding out on us. What does she do? She's in business, Lucas said vaguely, which was perhaps the understatement of the century. Look, can we not make a big deal about this? I'm nervous enough as it is. Fair enough, Daniel agreed. But if it goes well, I expect details. And if you need a pep talk beforehand, I'm available. I've been married 10 years. I know all the tricks. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. After Daniel left, Lucas tried to focus on the quarterly projection spreadsheet open on his screen, but his mind kept drifting to Saturday night. To Evelyn in an evening gown instead of jeans. To himself in borrowed formal wear, trying to navigate a world he'd only ever glimpsed from a distance. To the lie they were building together, and what it might cost them both. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Warren, this is Catherine Park, Miss Cross's executive assistant. Ms. Cross asked me to coordinate the details for Saturday evening. Would you be available for a brief call this afternoon to discuss logistics? Lucas stared at the message, reality settling over him like a weighted blanket. This was happening. He was actually going to do this. Sure, he typed back. I'm available after 3 p.m. The call came at 3:17, precisely 1 minute after Tommy's school day ended, which meant Lucas was standing in the parking lot watching his son play on the monkey bars while discussing formal wear requirements with a woman whose efficiency was honestly intimidating. The gala begins at 7, Catherine explained in a crisp, professional tone that suggested she coordinated impossible logistics before breakfast every day. Ms. Cross will have a car pick you up at 6:15. Regarding attire, we've arranged for a fitting appointment tomorrow at Giancarlo's. It's a formal wear boutique in the Loop. They're expecting you at noon. Is that time acceptable? Lucas watched Tommy hang upside down from the bars, his Superman t-shirt defying gravity. I work during the day. Can we do evening? Of course. I'll rearrange for 6 p.m. The fitting will take approximately 90 minutes. Will childcare be an issue? I'll figure something out, Lucas said, though he was already mentally calculating whether Mrs. Chen would be available and how much this favor was going to cost him. Ms. Cross has also prepared a briefing document, Catherine continued. Background information on the other attendees, key conversation topics to avoid, general guidance on navigating these events. I'll email it to you this evening. Do you have any questions? Lucas had about 800 questions, but most of them weren't appropriate for the CEO's assistant. Just one. Does Evelyn, Ms. Cross, does she attend these events often? There was a pause on the other end of the line, brief but weighted. Ms. Cross attends approximately 15 major corporate functions per year. She's quite skilled at them, though I don't believe she particularly enjoys the experience. Why do you ask? Just trying to understand what I'm walking into, Lucas said honestly. Mr. Warren, Catherine said, and her voice softened slightly. You're walking into a room full of people who will judge you based on your suit, your conversation, and your net worth in that order. My advice? Don't try to impress them. Just be yourself. It's clearly working so far. The call ended before Lucas could ask what she meant by that. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting anxiety. The briefing document Catherine sent was 23 pages long and read like a military intelligence report, complete with photographs of key players, their business interests, their personal histories, and color-coded warnings about topics to avoid. Lucas read it twice, took notes like he was studying for the bar exam, and promptly forgot half of it. The fitting at Giancarlo's was an experience that confirmed everything Lucas suspected about wealth inequality in America. The boutique occupied a converted brownstone in the Loop, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, and a sales associate named Philippe, who looked at Lucas's off-the-rack khakis with the kind of pity usually reserved for natural disaster victims. "So you're Ms. Cross's gentleman," Philippe said, circling Lucas like a predator assessing prey. "She has exquisite taste, of course. Very discerning. We'll need to work with what we have here." "Thanks," Lucas said, unsure if he'd just been complimented or insulted. What followed was 90 minutes of being measured, pinned, tucked, and generally treated like a doll being dressed for a very expensive tea party. Philippe draped him in charcoal wool and silk, muttering in what might have been French or might have been fashion speak. Lucas couldn't tell the difference. The final result, when Philippe finally allowed him to look in the full-length mirror, was startling. Lucas barely recognized himself. The man in the mirror looked sophisticated, polished, like someone who belonged at corporate galas and understood wine pairings. The suit fit perfectly, emphasizing the shoulders Lucas had maintained from his pre-fatherhood gym days, and somehow making him look taller, more confident, more like the kind of person who dated CEOs. "Well," Philippe said with obvious satisfaction, "Ms. Cross will be very pleased." Lucas thought about that on the drive home, about Evelyn being pleased, about what that meant, about whether he was doing this to help her or because some part of him wanted to be the kind of man who looked good in expensive suits and belonged at her side. The truth was probably both, which didn't make him feel better about anything. Saturday arrived with the inevitability of a deadline and the terror of a first day of school. Lucas spent the morning with Tommy making chocolate chip pancakes and building an elaborate Lego spaceship, trying to soak up normal family time before the evening's performance. He told Tommy he had a work dinner, which was technically true, and Mrs. Chen had agreed to stay over, though she'd given Lucas a knowing look that suggested she suspected this was more than just business. "You look nervous," Tommy observed over breakfast, syrup smeared across his cheek. "Are you nervous, Dad?" "A little," Lucas admitted, because he tried to be honest with Tommy about feelings. "I have an important dinner tonight. Lots of people I don't know." "Will there be other kids?" Tommy asked hopefully. "No, buddy. Just adults doing adult things. Boring stuff." Tommy made a face that eloquently expressed his opinion of adult things, then returned his attention to his pancakes, which were far more interesting than his father's social anxiety. At 5:30, Lucas showered and shaved, taking extra care because Philippe's words kept echoing in his mind. "Ms. Cross will be very pleased." He styled his hair, which stubbornly refused to cooperate, and gave up after the third attempt because he was a financial analyst, not a male model, and this was as good as it was going to get. The suit fit perfectly, transforming him once again into that stranger from the mirror. Lucas adjusted his tie for the 7th time, checked his reflection, and tried to convince himself he could do this. "Wow, Dad!" Tommy appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "You look like a prince." "Thanks, buddy," Lucas said, kneeling down to Tommy's level. "You be good for Mrs. Chen, okay? Bedtime at 8:30, no arguments." "Okay," Tommy promised, then threw his arms around Lucas's neck in a fierce hug that smelled like maple syrup and childhood. "Have fun at your boring dinner." "I'll try," Lucas said, hugging back, wondering what Tommy would think if he knew the truth, that his dad was about to pretend to be someone he wasn't, for a woman he barely knew at an event that cost more per plate than their monthly grocery budget. The car arrived at 6:14, a sleek black town car that looked like it cost more than Lucas's annual salary. The driver, an older gentleman with kind eyes and perfect posture, held the door open with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Warren," he said simply. "I'm James. I'll be driving you this evening." Lucas slid into the back seat, which smelled like leather and money and felt like stepping into a different universe entirely. The interior was all dark wood and soft lighting, with a small refrigerator stocked with water and what looked like very expensive champagne. "Ms. Cross asked me to inform you that she'll meet you at the venue," James said as they pulled into traffic. "She's coming directly from a board meeting and thought it would be easier than coordinating 2 pickups." "Makes sense," Lucas said, though his stomach dropped slightly at the thought of arriving alone, without Evelyn to anchor him through the first terrifying moments. The drive through Chicago gave Lucas time to review Catherine's briefing one more time, though the words kept blurring together. Anderson Foundation, childhood literacy. Don't mention Marcus's recent lawsuit. Don't discuss merger rumors. Don't embarrass yourself for Evelyn or the entire company. No pressure at all. The Grand Chrysler Hotel rose above Michigan Avenue like a monument to excess, all glass and gold and architectural ambition. James pulled up to the entrance, where a red carpet stretched toward ornate doors and photographers clustered like well-dressed vultures waiting for notable arrivals. "Good luck, Mr. Warren," James said as he opened the door. "You'll do fine." Lucas wanted to ask how he could possibly know that, but he was already stepping onto the red carpet, and there was no turning back now. The lobby was a study in opulence, marble columns, crystal chandeliers dripping light like frozen waterfalls, and everywhere the murmur of money and power, and people who'd never worried about rent payments or grocery budgets. Lucas felt immediately, viscerally out of place, like a kid who'd wandered into the wrong movie theater and was too polite to leave. He followed the flow of formally dressed guests toward the ballroom, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter because his hands needed something to do besides shake. The ballroom itself was breathtaking. High ceilings painted with cherubs and clouds, round tables dressed in white silk, a stage at the far end where a string quartet played something classical and vaguely familiar. Lucas scanned the crowd, searching for Evelyn, and found her almost immediately. She stood near the bar, talking to a group of older men in tuxedos, and Lucas's brain momentarily forgot how to process information. Evelyn wore a deep emerald gown that caught the light when she moved, her dark hair swept up in an elegant style that emphasized her neck and shoulders, diamond earrings catching the chandelier glow. She looked like power and grace and something wild barely contained, and Lucas felt his heart do that acrobatic thing again, only stronger this time. As if sensing his gaze, Evelyn turned. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and the smile that spread across her face was genuine and relieved and a little bit nervous, an expression Lucas understood completely because he was feeling exactly the same things. She excused herself from the conversation and crossed the room toward him, moving with the kind of confidence that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. "Hi," she said when she reached him, and her voice was softer than it should be in the middle of a crowded gala, intimate in a way that made Lucas acutely aware of how close she was standing. "Hi," Lucas managed. "You look... that dress is... You're really beautiful." Evelyn's eyes widened slightly, color rising in her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself," Philippe outdid himself. "Philippe has strong opinions about men's fashion," Lucas said. "I was mildly terrified the entire fitting." Evelyn laughed, and just like in the supermarket, the sound seemed to shift something in the air around them. "He has that effect on people, but the results speak for themselves. You look perfect." "I look terrified," Lucas corrected. "But in an expensive suit, so maybe nobody will notice." "You're going to be fine," Evelyn said, and there was something fierce in her voice, something protective that mirrored what he'd felt toward her in the dairy aisle. "Just stay close to me. Follow my lead. And remember, most of these people are far less impressive than they pretend to be." "Even you?" Lucas asked before he could stop himself. Evelyn's smile turned sad. "Especially me. I'm just better at hiding it." She hesitated, then reached for his hand, her fingers warm and slightly trembling against his palm. "Ready to be my boyfriend for the evening?" Lucas squeezed her hand gently, anchoring them both. "Lead the way." What followed was a masterclass in performance and endurance. Evelyn introduced him to what felt like hundreds of people, executives and investors, philanthropists and politicians, all of them assessing Lucas with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. He shook hands until his arm ached, made small talk about market trends and Chicago weather, nodded intelligently while people discussed companies and deals he had only vague understanding of. Through it all, Evelyn stayed close, her hand finding his at regular intervals, creating the illusion of intimate connection. And maybe it wasn't entirely illusion, because Lucas found himself genuinely engaged when she laughed at his quiet observations, or when she leaned in to whisper context about the person they were talking to, her breath warm against his ear. "That's Richard Pemberton," she murmured during one such moment. "Made his fortune in real estate, lost most of it in the 2008 crash, clawed it back through means his lawyers won't discuss. Loves to talk about his yacht. Do not ask about the yacht unless you have 30 minutes to spare." "Noted," Lucas whispered back. "Any other landmines I should know about?" "The woman in silver by the dessert table is Margaret Chen, not related to your babysitter, different Chen. She's brilliant, ruthless, and currently trying to poach 3 of my best executives. Be polite, but not too friendly." "This is like navigating a minefield in formal wear," Lucas observed. "Welcome to my world," Evelyn said dryly. "Every day, all day. You're doing great, by the way." "I haven't accidentally insulted anyone or spilled champagne on anybody important. I'm calling that a win." "The night is young," Evelyn teased, and Lucas realized with some surprise that he was actually enjoying himself, despite the pressure, despite the pretense, despite everything. Then Marcus Cross appeared, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He approached from the bar, a younger woman on his arm, blonde, elegant, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Lucas felt Evelyn's hand tighten on his, saw her spine stiffen almost imperceptibly, and moved closer without thinking, his body responding to her tension before his mind had fully registered the threat. "Evelyn," Marcus said smoothly, stopping directly in front of them with the confidence of someone who'd never been told to go away. "How lovely to see you here. And Lucas, the boyfriend from the supermarket, how unexpected that you're still around." The implication hung heavy, that Lucas was a temporary fixture, a phase, something that would pass like a bad cold. "Marcus," Evelyn replied, her voice cool and professionally neutral. "I didn't realize you were on the guest list." "The Anderson Foundation is very important to me," Marcus said, though his eyes suggested he couldn't care less about childhood literacy. "I've been a major donor for years. This is Natasha, my associate." Natasha offered a smile that was all teeth and calculation. Lucas was starting to understand that everyone at these events was playing a game, and the rules were written in a language he'd never learned. "Your associate," Evelyn repeated flatly. "How professional." "We believe in maintaining appropriate boundaries between personal and professional relationships," Marcus said, and the barb was clearly aimed at Evelyn and Lucas. "Something you might consider, darling, dating an employee rarely ends well." Lucas felt anger flare hot in his chest, not at the insult to himself, but at the casual cruelty directed at Evelyn, the way Marcus wielded intimacy like a weapon, calling her darling, like he still had rights to her warmth. "Actually," Lucas said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded, "Evelyn and I met outside of work. The professional relationship came after the personal one, so there's no boundary issue at all." It was a lie built on top of their original lie, but it felt necessary, protective, like stepping between Tommy and a bully on the playground. Marcus's eyes sharpened. "Is that so? How fortunate! And how does a financial analyst afford events like this? I imagine the ticket price alone must be challenging on your salary." The condescension was breathtaking, and Lucas felt Evelyn's entire body tense beside him. "He's here as my guest," Evelyn said, and there was steel beneath the silk of her voice now. "Just as Natasha is yours. The difference is, Lucas chose to be here because he cares about me, not because I'm paying him to smile prettily for the cameras." Natasha's smile froze, Marcus's jaw tightened, and Lucas had to suppress the urge to laugh at the beautiful brutality of Evelyn's response. Still so defensive, Marcus observed. Still so quick to attack. This is why we couldn't make it work, Evelyn. You can't just be happy. You always have to win. No, Evelyn said quietly, and Lucas heard decades of hurt compressed into that single syllable. We couldn't make it work because you wanted a trophy wife who'd smile and stay silent, and I wanted a partner who saw me as a person. Lucas is the first man in years who's managed that basic courtesy. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, anger giving way to something uglier, more dangerous. Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts, he said softly, looking directly at Lucas now. But understand something. Evelyn doesn't do relationships. She does acquisitions. Right now you're interesting. A project, something different. But eventually she'll get bored and you'll discover that dating above your station comes with a price. Ask me how I know. Before Lucas could respond, Marcus walked away, Natasha trailing behind him like an expensive accessory, leaving Lucas and Evelyn standing in the middle of the ballroom with the weight of his words settling over them like ash. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. I shouldn't have brought you into this. He's right. You don't deserve to be caught in the middle of our mess. Lucas turned to face her fully, seeing past the perfect makeup and the elegant dress to the woman who'd looked terrified in a supermarket, who'd asked for help because she'd run out of other options. He's not right, Lucas said firmly. About anything, especially about you. Evelyn's eyes shone with unshed tears. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. Maybe not, Lucas agreed, but I know what I've seen. I know you thanked me, even though you didn't have to. I know you worry about crossing professional boundaries, and you wrote a 23-page briefing document so I wouldn't feel lost tonight. I know you just defended me to your ex-husband when you could have stayed silent and let it pass. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. A single tear escaped, tracking down Evelyn's cheek before she quickly brushed it away. Lucas? Mr. Warren? Miss Cross? They both turned to find a tall woman with silver hair approaching, her expression friendly and curious. Catherine's briefing document supplied the context immediately. Diane Morrison, president of the Anderson Foundation, the whole reason they were all here tonight. Ms. Morrison, Evelyn said, her professional mask sliding back into place with practiced efficiency. How wonderful to see you. And you, my dear, I wanted to introduce myself to your companion. I don't believe we've met? The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of conversation about childhood literacy programs and corporate philanthropy, with Diane Morrison asking surprisingly thoughtful questions about Lucas's perspective on public education, questions he actually had answers for, thanks to Tommy's school experience. Evelyn watched him with something that looked like wonder, and Lucas felt himself relaxing into the conversation, forgetting momentarily that he was pretending, that this wasn't really his life. When Diane finally excused herself to greet other guests, Evelyn turned to Lucas with open amazement. You just charmed the president of the Anderson Foundation, she said. Do you have any idea how difficult that is? I just talked about what matters to Tommy's school, Lucas said with a shrug. Turns out people like honesty. Who knew? I knew, Evelyn said softly. That's why I asked you to come tonight. The gala continued around them. Dinner served on china that probably cost more than Lucas's rent, speeches about the importance of literacy and education, an auction for various luxury items that people bid on with the casual indifference of those for whom money had lost all meaning. Through it all, Lucas and Evelyn maintained their performance, playing the role of couple with increasing ease. But somewhere between the main course and dessert, Lucas realized it had stopped feeling like performance. The way Evelyn's hand rested on his arm felt natural. The way she leaned into him when she laughed felt right. The conversation between them had shifted from scripted pleasantries to genuine connection, and Lucas couldn't remember exactly when that had happened. Near the end of the evening, they found themselves alone on a balcony overlooking Michigan Avenue, the city lights spreading below them like scattered diamonds. Evelyn had kicked off her heels. Lucas had watched her do it with a sigh of relief that made him smile, and now stood barefoot on the marble, looking more relaxed than she had all night. Thank you, she said quietly, staring out at the skyline. For everything tonight. For defending me to Marcus. For being exactly yourself even when people expected something different. For making this bearable. You made it bearable too, Lucas said honestly. I was terrified when I arrived. You made me feel like I belonged here." Evelyn turned to look at him, and in the soft glow of the city lights, she looked young and vulnerable and achingly beautiful. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "When you agreed to do this, to be my fake boyfriend for the evening, was it really just to help me? Or was there some other reason?" Lucas considered the question, considered all the careful lies he could tell, and all the safer truths he could offer. Then he thought about Tommy's advice on honesty and decided his 6-year-old was probably smarter than he gave him credit for. "At first, yes," Lucas admitted. "I wanted to help you because you needed help. But somewhere between the supermarket and tonight, it became something else. I wanted to be here because I like you, Evelyn. Not the CEO, not the public persona, you. The woman who writes 23-page briefing documents and kicks off her shoes the first chance she gets, and looks at me like I'm actually worth seeing." Evelyn's breath caught audibly. "Lucas, you don't have to say anything," Lucas interrupted gently. "I know this isn't real. I know on Monday morning you'll be back on the 42nd floor, and I'll be back in my cubicle, and this will just be a story we tell ourselves about one strange weekend. But for tonight, for right now, I wanted you to know the truth." For a long moment, Evelyn just stared at him, and Lucas wondered if he'd just destroyed whatever fragile thing they'd built together. Then she closed the distance between them, rising on her tiptoes, and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that tasted like champagne, and possibility, and something dangerously close to hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn rested her forehead against his. "What if it doesn't have to end on Monday?" she whispered. And Lucas, who'd spent 3 years playing it safe, who'd built his entire life around stability and caution and protecting his heart from further damage, made the most reckless decision of his adult life. "Then let's see where this goes," he said. "For real this time. No pretending." Evelyn's smile was radiant and terrified in equal measure. "No pretending," she agreed. They stayed on that balcony for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, building something real on the foundation of their carefully constructed lies. And when they finally returned to the ballroom, hands intertwined, Lucas caught sight of Marcus across the room, watching them with an expression that promised complications ahead. But for tonight, Lucas didn't care. For tonight, he had Evelyn's hand in his, and the city lights behind them, and the beginning of something that felt worth fighting for. The hard part would come later. The hard part came exactly 9 days later, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, and ended with Lucas's entire world fracturing into pieces he wasn't sure could be reassembled. Those 9 days had been the strangest, most exhilarating period of Lucas's adult life. After the gala, after that kiss on the balcony, and the whispered promise to make things real, he and Evelyn had fallen into a rhythm that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Late-night phone calls after Tommy went to bed, where they talked about everything from childhood memories to corporate strategy to whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Stolen lunch meetings in small cafes far from Cross Enterprises, where Evelyn would show up in sunglasses like she was going incognito, and Lucas would tease her about her terrible disguise. One dinner at Lucas's apartment where Tommy had charmed Evelyn completely by explaining the intricate politics of first-grade recess and showing her his entire collection of dinosaur figurines. "This one's a velociraptor," Tommy had explained with the serious authority of a 6-year-old expert. "They hunted in packs and were actually really smart. Not like in the movies." Evelyn had listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Tommy light up with joy, and Lucas had watched them together feeling something dangerous and wonderful unfold in his chest. The possibility that this could work, that they could build something real despite the impossible circumstances. But underneath the happiness ran a current of anxiety that Lucas couldn't quite silence. They were still hiding, still keeping their relationship secret from the office, still pretending in public that they were nothing more than CEO and employee. Evelyn insisted it was necessary, that they needed time to figure things out before dealing with corporate policies and public scrutiny. Lucas understood the logic, even agreed with it, but the deception felt heavier with each passing day. He should have known it couldn't last. Should have recognized that secrets in a place like Cross Enterprises had a half-life measured in days rather than weeks, that gossip moved through office floors faster than email, that someone was always watching. The explosion came during a routine Tuesday morning meeting. Lucas was presenting the quarterly financial projections to his department head, James Chen, no relation to his babysitter, different Chen, as Evelyn would have said, when his desk phone rang. He ignored it, focused on explaining the third quarter forecast, but it rang again immediately, and again. "Sorry," Lucas muttered, glancing at the caller ID Catherine Park. His stomach dropped. "I need to take this." James nodded, and Lucas stepped into the hallway, pressing the phone to his ear with a sense of impending doom. "Mr. Warren," Catherine said, and her voice was tight with controlled urgency. "Ms. Cross needs to see you in her office immediately. Please come to the 42nd floor." "I'm in the middle of a presentation. Now, Mr. Warren, please." The line went dead. Lucas stood in the hallway for a moment, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Evelyn just wanted to see him, though that didn't explain Catherine's tone. Maybe there was a problem with one of his reports, though that wouldn't require an immediate summons to the executive floor. Or maybe their secret was out, and everything was about to fall apart. He told James he had an urgent matter to attend to, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the elevators with his heart hammering against his ribs. The ride to the 42nd floor felt both endless and too fast, giving him time to imagine every worst-case scenario while providing no answers. The executive floor was a different world, all glass walls and modern art, and the kind of hushed efficiency that came from assistants who could destroy careers with a strategically placed email. Catherine met him as soon as he stepped off the elevator, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes sympathetic in a way that made Lucas's anxiety spike higher. "She's waiting for you," Catherine said quietly, gesturing toward Evelyn's corner office. "Mr. Warren, whatever happens in there, remember that Ms. Cross is trying to protect you. She may not show it, but she is." Before Lucas could ask what that meant, Catherine was walking away, leaving him standing alone outside the closed door of Evelyn's office. He knocked twice, heard Evelyn's voice call for him to enter, and stepped into what felt like the principal's office and an execution chamber simultaneously. Evelyn sat behind her desk, massive, modern, probably worth more than Lucas's car, but she wasn't alone. Two other people occupied the chairs across from her, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that could cut glass, and a younger man in an expensive suit taking notes on a tablet. "Lucas," Evelyn said, and her voice was her CEO voice, the one she used in company emails and board meetings, devoid of the warmth he'd heard 9 nights ago when she'd whispered his name against his lips. "Thank you for coming. This is Margaret Winters, our head of human resources, and David Park, our corporate counsel. Please sit down." Lucas sat, feeling like he was moving through water, everything slow and dreamlike and wrong. "Mr. Warren," Margaret began, her voice crisp and businesslike, "we've become aware of a relationship between you and Ms. Cross that violates several company policies regarding fraternization between executives and subordinate employees. Specifically, policies 14A through 14D in your employee handbook, which you signed upon hiring." The words hit Lucas like physical blows. Somewhere in his mind, he'd known this moment would come, but hearing it stated so baldly, in such clinical terms, made it real in a way that stolen kisses and whispered promises never had. "We're not," Lucas started, but Margaret held up a hand. "We have photographic evidence from the Anderson Foundation Gala," she continued, and David turned his tablet around to show Lucas a series of images. Lucas and Evelyn on the balcony, their foreheads touching. The kiss that had felt like the beginning of everything and now looked like the end. These photos were provided to the board yesterday by an anonymous source, along with testimony from multiple employees who have witnessed you and Ms. Cross entering and exiting buildings together, having private meetings at off-site locations, and displaying behavior inconsistent with a purely professional relationship. Lucas looked at Evelyn, searching her face for some sign of what he should say, how he should respond, but she was staring at her desk, her expression carefully blank. "The board takes these violations very seriously," Margaret continued. "Cross Enterprises has strict policies in place to prevent exactly this type of situation. Relationships where power dynamics create the potential for favoritism, harassment, or the appearance of impropriety. Ms. Cross holds a position of significant authority within this organization. and you are a mid-level employee. The power differential makes this relationship inherently problematic. I pursued him, Evelyn said suddenly, her voice sharp and firm. Lucas did nothing wrong. I initiated contact. I invited him to the gala. I pushed for the relationship to continue. If anyone violated company policy, it was me. He's the victim here, not the perpetrator. Lucas's heart cracked at hearing her describe him as a victim, at the way she was trying to take all the blame, to shield him even now. Ms. Cross, David said gently, we understand you feel protective of Mr. Warren, but the reality is that both parties are responsible for maintaining professional boundaries. The board's position is clear. This situation cannot continue. Fine, Evelyn said, and there was steel in her voice now. Then I'll resign. Effective immediately. Lucas keeps his job, his benefits, his career trajectory. I'll sign whatever documents you need, make whatever statements will protect him and the company, but he doesn't lose anything because of my mistakes. No, Lucas said, the word torn from his throat before he could stop it. Evelyn, no, you can't do that. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Lucas saw everything she was feeling written in her eyes, fear and love and determination and desperation. I can and I will, she said softly. You have Tommy to think about. You can't afford to lose this job. I have resources, options, safety nets you don't have. This is the only solution that protects you. The board isn't asking for your resignation, Ms. Cross, Margaret interjected. What we're proposing is a different solution. Mr. Warren will be placed on immediate paid administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation into the nature of this relationship and any potential policy violations. During this time, he'll receive full salary and benefits. Once the investigation is complete, we'll determine the appropriate next steps. Administrative leave. The words sounded benign, professional, but Lucas understood what they really meant. Suspension without the formal title, removal from the office while they built their case, isolation from Evelyn while they decided his fate. How long? Lucas asked, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Approximately 4 to 6 weeks, David answered. We need time to interview witnesses, review documentation, determine if there were any instances of favoritism or inappropriate use of company resources. It's standard procedure in cases like this. Cases like this. Like Lucas was a problem to be solved, a scandal to be managed, rather than a person who'd fallen for someone extraordinary and made the mistake of working for her company. And what happens to Evelyn during this investigation? Lucas demanded. Margaret's expression softened fractionally. Ms. Cross will continue in her role as CEO, with the understanding that she will have no direct or indirect contact with you during the investigation period. Any communication will be considered a violation of the terms and will result in immediate consequences for both parties. No contact. For 4 to 6 weeks. Lucas felt the words settle over him like a prison sentence. This is ridiculous, he said, anger finally breaking through his shock. We're two adults who developed feelings for each other. We haven't done anything wrong. Evelyn never gave me preferential treatment, never used her position to pressure me into anything. If anything, she went out of her way to keep things separate from work. That may be true, David said carefully, but perception matters in these situations. The photos from the gala are already circulating on social media. There are questions about how a mid-level analyst ended up as the CEO's date to a major corporate event. The board needs to be able to demonstrate that we take these policies seriously, that we investigated thoroughly, that we didn't allow personal relationships to compromise the company's integrity. So this is about optics, Lucas said bitterly, about protecting the company's reputation rather than actually determining if anyone did anything wrong. This is about following procedure, Margaret corrected, about ensuring that all employees feel confident that advancement and opportunity within this company are based on merit rather than personal connections. I understand you're upset, Mr. Warren, but these policies exist for good reasons. Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to do something other than sit here accepting this corporate dismantling of his life. But he could see the futility of it in Margaret's expression, in David's careful neutrality, in the way Evelyn had gone very still and quiet across the desk. Fine, Lucas said finally. I'll accept the administrative leave. I'll cooperate with your investigation. But I want it on record that Ms. Cross did nothing wrong. that our relationship was entirely consensual and separate from our professional roles, and that if anyone needs to be punished here, it should be me, not her. Your statement will be noted, David assured him, making a notation on his tablet. Margaret stood, signaling that the meeting was over. Mr. Warren, Catherine will provide you with the necessary paperwork and escort you to collect your personal items from your desk. We'll be in touch within the next few days to schedule your interview as part of the investigation. Until then, please refrain from contacting anyone at Cross Enterprises, including Ms. Cross. Do you understand? Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. Ms. Cross, we'll need to schedule a follow-up meeting with you and the board this afternoon, Margaret continued. 3 o'clock in the main conference room. Evelyn nodded once, her expression still carefully controlled. Margaret and David left, closing the door behind them with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. For a moment, Lucas and Evelyn sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them like physical force. "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered finally, and when Lucas looked at her, he saw tears tracking down her face, destroying her careful makeup. "I'm so sorry, Lucas. I knew this was a risk. I knew we should have been more careful, but I was selfish and I wanted you, and now I've destroyed everything." Lucas stood and crossed to her side of the desk, pulling her up and into his arms despite Margaret's warnings about contact, despite the investigation, despite everything. Evelyn collapsed against him, her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back throughout the entire meeting. "You didn't destroy anything," Lucas said fiercely, holding her close. "We made a choice together. We knew the risk." You could lose your job," Evelyn said against his chest. "Tommy's security, his stability, everything you've worked so hard to build, because of me." "Because of us," Lucas corrected, "and we're going to fight this. We're going to get through the investigation and prove that we didn't do anything wrong." Evelyn pulled back enough to look at him, her green eyes red and desperate. "What if we can't? What if they decide to terminate you anyway? What if Marcus is behind this, the anonymous tip, the photos? What if he's orchestrating everything to hurt me by destroying you?" The thought had already occurred to Lucas, but hearing Evelyn voice it made it more real, more terrifying. "Then we deal with that when it comes," Lucas said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But right now, we need to be smart. We need to follow their rules, cooperate with the investigation, and trust that the truth will matter." "The truth doesn't always matter in corporate America," Evelyn said bitterly. "Sometimes all that matters is avoiding scandal and protecting the stock price." A knock on the door interrupted them. Catherine, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, Ms. Cross, but I need to escort Mr. Warren out now. Margaret's orders." Evelyn nodded, brushing at her tears ineffectively. "Of course." Lucas wanted to kiss her one more time, wanted to promise her that everything would be okay, wanted to rage against the unfairness of being separated when they'd only just found each other. Instead, he squeezed her hand once and let Catherine lead him away. The walk back to the 23rd floor felt like a death march. People stared as he passed, and Lucas realized the news must have already spread through the office grapevine. By the time he reached his cubicle, the entire floor had gone quiet, everyone pretending to work while actually watching him pack his personal items into a cardboard box Catherine had provided. Daniel appeared at his cubicle wall, his expression stricken. "Lucas, man, I just heard. Is it true? You and Ms. Cross?" Lucas didn't look up from packing his photos of Tommy, his few personal books, the coffee mug Tommy had made him in art class. "Yeah, it's true." "Holy shit," Daniel breathed. "I mean, I knew you said you were seeing someone, but I never imagined. How did this even happen?" "It just did," Lucas said shortly, not wanting to explain, not wanting to turn their relationship into office gossip. "Look, I can't really talk about it right now." "Right, of course, I'm sorry." Daniel hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think it's bullshit. You're a good guy, Lucas. Whatever happened, I know you didn't do anything wrong." Lucas looked up then, grateful for the support even as it made his chest ache. "Thanks, Daniel. That means a lot." The rest of the packing passed in silence. When Lucas was finished, Catherine escorted him to the elevators, handed him a folder of paperwork he'd need to review, and offered him a sympathetic smile. "She cares about you very much, Mr. Warren. Catherine said quietly. "I've worked for Miss Cross for 7 years, and I've never seen her fight for anyone the way she fought for you in that meeting. Whatever happens, please remember that." Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice, and stepped into the elevator. The ride down felt endless. When the doors finally opened on the ground floor, Lucas walked through the lobby of Cross Enterprises carrying his box of personal items and feeling like he was leaving behind more than just a job. He was leaving behind stability, security, the careful life he'd built for Tommy. He was leaving behind Evelyn, separated by corporate policy and investigation protocols and forces far beyond his control. Outside, Chicago was experiencing an unseasonably warm afternoon, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt like a cruel joke given Lucas's circumstances. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, box in his arms, trying to figure out what came next. Where did you go when your job had just been suspended and your girlfriend was forbidden from contacting you and your entire life had been upended in the space of an hour? His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I know we're not supposed to communicate, but I needed you to know this isn't over. I'm going to fix this. I promise." E. Lucas stared at the message, torn between gratitude and fear. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that she could somehow make this right, but he'd learned the hard way that promises were fragile things, easily broken by reality and circumstance. He typed a response. "Don't do anything that puts you at risk. I can survive this. Just be safe." L. Her reply came immediately. "You shouldn't have to just survive. You deserve to be happy. We both do. I'll find a way." Then, a moment later, "I'm deleting this thread. Too risky." But I meant every word. Lucas deleted his thread too, erasing the evidence of their communication, though the words stayed burned in his memory. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange, suspended reality. Lucas spent his days trying to maintain normalcy for Tommy, school drop-offs and pickups, homework help, dinner and bedtime routines, while wrestling with anxiety about the investigation and the future. He attended his formal interview with Margaret and David, answered their questions honestly about how the relationship had started, how it had progressed, whether Evelyn had ever shown him favoritism. They asked about the gala, about dinners, about every interaction he could remember, taking notes and maintaining professional neutrality while Lucas felt like he was being slowly dissected. The hardest part was explaining to Tommy why he was suddenly home all day. "Did you get fired, Dad?" Tommy asked one afternoon, his small face scrunched with worry. "Nobody," Lucas assured him, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I'm just taking a break from work for a little while, like a vacation." "But we're not going anywhere fun," Tommy observed with 6-year-old logic. "And you seem sad." Lucas pulled his son into his lap, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo and feeling his heart crack a little more. "I am a little sad," he admitted, because he tried to be honest with Tommy about feelings. "Some stuff at work got complicated. But it's nothing you need to worry about, okay? No matter what happens, we're going to be fine." "Is it because of Evelyn?" Tommy asked, and Lucas's heart stopped. "What makes you say that?" "Because you were happy when she came over for dinner," Tommy explained. "And then you stopped talking about her, and now you're home and sad. Did you guys break up?" Sometimes Lucas forgot how perceptive children could be, how they noticed patterns and connections that adults thought they were hiding. "Kind of," Lucas said carefully. "We can't see each other right now because of work rules, but that doesn't mean we stopped caring about each other." "That's dumb," Tommy declared. "If you like someone, you should be able to see them. That's what my friend Mia says, and she's really smart." "Mia sounds very wise," Lucas agreed, "but sometimes adult stuff is complicated in ways that don't make sense. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of it." Tommy hugged him fiercely. "It's okay, Dad. We're a team, remember? Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." Lucas held his son close and tried to believe it. During week 4 of his administrative leave, Lucas received a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer, expecting a telemarketer or a wrong number, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Warren, this is Jeremy Price. I'm an investigative journalist with the Chicago Tribune." Lucas's stomach dropped. "I'm not interested in—" "I'm working on a story about Cross Enterprises and CEO Evelyn Cross," Jeremy continued quickly, as if he'd expected Lucas to hang up. specifically about allegations of inappropriate relationships with employees and potential abuse of power. I have sources claiming this isn't the first time Ms. Cross has become involved with subordinates, that there's a pattern of behavior the company has covered up. I was hoping you might be willing to comment. The words hit Lucas like ice water. That's not true. None of that is true. So you're confirming you had a relationship with Ms. Cross? Lucas realized too late that he'd walked directly into the trap. I'm not confirming anything, and I'm definitely not going to help you write a hit piece based on lies. Mr. Warren, I understand you may feel protective of Ms. Cross, but the public has a right to know if a CEO is abusing her position. If you cooperate with this investigation, I can ensure your perspective is represented fairly. Otherwise, the story runs without your input, and you become just another unnamed source. Then I'll be an unnamed source who tells you to go to hell, Lucas said, and hung up. His hands were shaking. He immediately called Catherine, not caring if it violated investigation protocols, because this was bigger than corporate policy. Mr. Warren, Catherine answered on the second ring, you shouldn't be calling this number. I know, I'm sorry, but I just got contacted by a journalist from the Tribune. He's working on a story claiming Evelyn has a history of inappropriate relationships with employees. Catherine, that's not true, is it? Tell me that's not true. The pause on the other end lasted too long. Catherine? It's not true, she said finally, but her voice was tight. But someone is feeding information to the press, likely the same person who provided the photos to the board. Ms. Cross is aware of the situation and is working with our PR team to manage it. This is Marcus, Lucas said with certainty. He's trying to destroy her reputation. We don't have proof of that, Catherine said carefully. But yes, the timing is suspicious. Mr. Warren, you need to be very careful. If that journalist contacts you again, don't engage. Refer him to our communications department. And whatever you do, don't let him bait you into saying anything that could be misconstrued. Too late, Lucas admitted. I already confirmed I had a relationship with her. Catherine sighed. Then we'll need to work with that. I'll inform Ms. Cross and the PR team. In the meantime, please, no more unauthorized communication. I'm already violating protocols by talking to you right now. After she hung up, Lucas sat in his quiet apartment, Tommy at school, his future uncertain, and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. 4 weeks ago, he'd been happy, genuinely happy for the first time since Sarah had left. He'd had Evelyn and hope and the possibility of building something real. Now he had an investigation hanging over his head, a journalist digging for scandal, and no way to reach the woman he was falling in love with. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Against his better judgment, Lucas clicked it. The headline made his blood run cold. Cross Enterprises CEO, Evelyn Cross. Under fire for alleged workplace romance. The article was everything Jeremy Price had threatened, speculation and anonymous sources and carefully worded accusations that stopped just short of outright lies. It mentioned Lucas by name, described him as a mid-level employee with limited experience, implied that his relationship with Evelyn was part of a pattern of inappropriate behavior. It included quotes from former employees, unnamed, unverified, claiming Evelyn had a reputation for favoritism toward attractive male subordinates. It was character assassination dressed up as journalism, and Lucas felt physically sick reading it. He called the only person he could think of who might help, Daniel. Have you seen the Tribune article? Lucas asked without preamble. Yeah, man, it's bad. Everyone in the office is talking about it. Some people believe it, some think it's bullshit, but either way, it's everywhere. Daniel, I need you to know none of that is true. Evelyn never pressured me, never showed me favoritism, never did any of the things that article is implying. We fell for each other despite the complications, not because she was abusing her power. I believe you, Daniel said immediately. And I'm not the only one. A lot of people here think this is a setup, that someone's trying to take her down. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? I'm on administrative leave. I'm not allowed to contact Evelyn. I'm not supposed to talk to the press. I'm completely powerless. You're not powerless, Daniel insisted. You're the one person who knows the truth about what really happened. That has to count for something. But did it? Lucas wasn't sure anymore. The truth felt fragile and insufficient against the weight of corporate policy and public scandal and forces that had been set in motion before he and Evelyn had even met. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Lucas sat alone in his living room and did something he hadn't done in months. He pulled out a bottle of whiskey left over from some forgotten celebration, poured himself a generous glass, and let himself feel the full weight of his situation. The investigation, the scandal, the very real possibility that he would lose everything: his job, his reputation, his relationship with Evelyn, his ability to provide for Tommy. He'd tried so hard to do everything right after Sarah left, to be responsible, stable, careful, to protect Tommy from chaos and uncertainty. And now, because he'd made the reckless decision to help a frightened woman in a supermarket, because he'd let himself feel something real for the first time in years, it was all falling apart. Lucas was on his second glass when his phone rang. Another unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Some desperate hope that maybe this was Evelyn finding a way to reach him despite the restrictions. Lucas Warren? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? My name is Sarah Reeves. I'm an attorney specializing in employment law. I've been following your situation with Cross Enterprises, and I believe you may have grounds for a wrongful termination suit if they decide to let you go. I haven't been terminated, Lucas said cautiously. Not yet, Sarah agreed, but if the investigation concludes unfavorably, you could be. And based on the public reporting and the circumstances you've described, there may be a case that you're being scapegoated to protect the company's reputation. I'd like to discuss your options. Lucas thought about that, about fighting back, about turning this into a legal battle, about adding lawyers and lawsuits to the already complicated mess. I appreciate the offer, he said finally, but I'm not interested in suing anyone. I just want this to be resolved fairly. Mr. Warren, fairness rarely happens without pressure. Think about it. My offer stands. After she hung up, Lucas sat with her business card in his hand and wondered if he was being noble or just naive. Wondered if fighting was the right answer, or if it would just make everything worse. Wondered if Evelyn was sitting in her 42nd floor office right now, drinking expensive wine and wrestling with the same impossible questions. He wanted to call her, wanted to hear her voice, to know she was okay, to remind himself why all of this mattered. But he'd promised to follow the rules, and breaking them now would only give ammunition to whoever was trying to destroy them. So instead, Lucas poured the rest of his whiskey down the sink, checked on Tommy one more time, and went to bed, hoping that tomorrow would bring some kind of clarity, some indication of what came next. What came next was a message from Catherine, delivered at 8 a.m. sharp. The investigation has concluded. Margaret Winters needs to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Cross Enterprises to discuss the findings. Please confirm your attendance. Lucas stared at the message, his heart racing. This was it. The moment that would determine his future, Tommy's security, everything he'd been holding his breath waiting for. He typed his response with shaking hands. I'll be there. Lucas arrived at Cross Enterprises 15 minutes early, which gave him exactly 15 minutes to sit in his car and contemplate every worst-case scenario his anxiety could manufacture. He dropped Tommy at school with a forced smile and a promise to pick him up on time, not mentioning that this meeting could determine whether they'd need to start looking at cheaper apartments or pulling Tommy out of his current school or any of the 100 other catastrophic possibilities that had kept Lucas awake most of the night. The building looked exactly as it had 6 weeks ago when he'd worked here, but everything felt different now. Lucas walked through the lobby with his visitor badge. They'd revoked his employee access during the investigation, and felt like a ghost haunting his former life. People he'd worked with for 3 years passed him in the lobby, and some nodded in recognition while others pretended not to see him, uncomfortable with his sudden transformation from colleague to scandal. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending toward judgment. Lucas watched the numbers climb and tried to remember the breathing exercises Tommy's pediatrician had taught them for managing anxiety. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It didn't help much. Catherine met him at the elevator again, but this time her professional mask had cracks in it. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying recently, and her smile was strained. Mr. Warren, she said quietly, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Lucas asked, not unkindly. No, she admitted, but I appreciate your cooperation anyway. She hesitated, glancing around to make sure they were alone. Lucas, I need you to know, whatever happens in that meeting, Ms. Cross fought for you. She fought harder than I've ever seen her fight for anything. Please remember that. Before Lucas could ask what that meant, Catherine was leading him down the hall, past Evelyn's office. The door was closed, no light visible underneath, to a conference room where Margaret Winters and David Park sat with several folders spread across the table like evidence at a trial. Mr. Warren, Margaret said, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit down. Lucas sat, his heart hammering so hard he was certain they could hear it. Margaret opened one of the folders, her expression carefully neutral. We've completed our investigation into your relationship with Ms. Cross. We interviewed 17 employees, reviewed email communications, examined expense reports, and analyzed your performance evaluations over the past 3 years. Lucas waited, barely breathing. Our findings are as follows, Margaret continued, reading from what looked like an official report. We found no evidence of professional favoritism toward you. Your performance evaluations were consistent with your actual work output and were in line with evaluations given to colleagues with similar experience and results. We found no evidence that Ms. Cross used company resources inappropriately to benefit your relationship. We found no evidence of sexual harassment or coercion in either direction. Lucas felt something loosen in his chest, hope flickering to life despite his efforts to contain it. However, Margaret said, and that single word extinguished the hope immediately. We did find that your relationship violated company policy regarding fraternization between executives and subordinate employees. The policy exists regardless of consent or favoritism, and the violation occurred regardless of intent. So what does that mean? Lucas asked, his voice rough. Am I fired? Margaret and David exchanged a glance that Lucas couldn't interpret. The board's initial recommendation was termination, David said carefully. The publicity around this situation has been damaging to Cross Enterprises' reputation. Terminating both parties seemed like the cleanest resolution from a PR perspective. Both parties. Lucas's stomach dropped. You're firing Evelyn too? We were considering it, Margaret corrected. However, Ms. Cross made a counter-proposal that the board has accepted. She slid a document across the table toward Lucas. He picked it up with shaking hands and tried to make sense of the legal language swimming before his eyes. Ms. Cross has submitted her resignation as CEO of Cross Enterprises, effective in 30 days, Margaret explained. In exchange, the board has agreed to reinstate you to your position with full back pay for the duration of your administrative leave, no negative marks on your employment record, and a written recommendation should you choose to seek employment elsewhere. The words hit Lucas like physical blows. Resigned. Evelyn had resigned. She'd given up everything, her position, her company, her legacy, to protect his job, his career, his ability to provide for Tommy. No, Lucas said, the word torn from somewhere deep in his chest. No, she can't do that. She can't throw away everything she's built because of me. It's already done, David said quietly. She submitted the paperwork 3 days ago. The board accepted it yesterday. You're being notified as a courtesy before the official announcement goes out this afternoon. Lucas couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Evelyn had sacrificed everything, and she hadn't even told him, hadn't given him a chance to fight it or find another solution or, where is she? Lucas demanded. I need to talk to her. Ms. Cross is not in the office today, Catherine said from the doorway. And Lucas realized she'd been standing there the whole time, listening. She's at home. And before you ask, no, I can't give you her address. That would violate about 6 different privacy policies. Lucas stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. This isn't right. You can't let her do this. Mr. Warren, Margaret said, her voice gentler than Lucas had ever heard it. Ms. Cross made her choice. She was very clear about her priorities. You and your son's well-being came first. The board tried to negotiate other options, but she refused every alternative that didn't guarantee your complete protection. She doesn't get to make that choice alone, Lucas said desperately. This affects both of us. Our relationship, our future. She can't just decide unilaterally to destroy her career. Actually, she can, David pointed out. And she did. Your options now are to accept her sacrifice and return to work, or to refuse reinstatement and make her sacrifice meaningless. Those are the only two choices available. Lucas wanted to flip the table, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything other than stand here accepting that Evelyn had given up everything while he got to keep his comfortable, safe, meaningless job. "If I refuse reinstatement," Lucas said slowly, "if I resign too, does that change anything? Can the board bring her back?" Margaret shook her head. "Miss Cross's resignation is independent of your employment status. Even if you quit, she's still gone. The board has already begun the search for her replacement. It was a trap with no exit, a sacrifice he couldn't undo, a gift he didn't want and couldn't refuse because refusing it would make Evelyn's choice pointless." "I need time," Lucas said. "I need to think about this." "Of course," Margaret agreed. "We're not expecting you back until next Monday at the earliest. Take the rest of the week, process everything. And Mr. Warren, I know this isn't the outcome you wanted, but Miss Cross was adamant that you not blame yourself. She said to tell you that some things are worth the cost, and you were worth every penny." Lucas left the building in a daze, moving through the lobby and onto the street like a sleepwalker, Catherine's words echoing in his mind alongside Margaret's. "She fought for you. You were worth every penny. Some things are worth the cost." He made it to his car before the full weight of it hit him, before the reality crashed down that Evelyn had chosen him over everything else in her life, had thrown herself on the corporate sword to protect a man she'd known for less than 2 months, had valued his happiness and Tommy's security above her own legacy and career. Lucas sat in his car in the parking garage and let himself break. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere primal and desperate, mourning not just the loss of Evelyn from his daily life, but the injustice of it, the wrongness of a system that demanded this kind of sacrifice, the cruelty of being saved at the cost of someone else's destruction. His phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Just heard the news about Ms. Cross. Everyone's in shock. Are you okay?" Lucas stared at the message, unsure how to answer. Was he okay? He still had his job. He could still pay rent, still keep Tommy in his school, still maintain the stable life he'd worked so hard to build. By every practical measure, he should be relieved, grateful even. Instead, he felt hollow, empty, like he'd won a prize he never wanted at a cost he couldn't justify. He drove home on autopilot, pulled into his apartment complex, and sat in the parking lot trying to figure out what came next. He couldn't see Evelyn. She'd made sure of that by resigning, by removing the investigation restrictions, but replacing them with the even more insurmountable barrier of having given up everything for him. How could he face her knowing what she'd sacrificed? How could he look her in the eye and accept that gift without feeling crushed by the weight of it? His phone rang. Unknown number again. Lucas almost didn't answer, but some instinct made him pick up. "Mr. Warren? Jeremy Price from the Tribune. I wanted to get your comment on Miss Cross's resignation. Do you feel responsible for her losing her position?" Lucas hung up without responding, but the damage was done. The journalist's question had articulated the thought Lucas had been trying not to acknowledge. That yes, he felt responsible. That Evelyn had lost everything because of him, because he'd agreed to be her fake boyfriend in a supermarket, because he'd fallen for her despite knowing better. Another text, this time from Catherine. "I wasn't supposed to tell you this, but Miss Cross wanted you to have her personal number. She said if you wanted to reach her, you could. No pressure, just an option. Here it is." The number appeared below the message, 10 digits that represented a choice Lucas wasn't sure he was brave enough to make. What would he even say to her? "Thank you for destroying your career. I'm sorry I wasn't worth this. I love you, but I can't accept what you've done." Lucas saved the number but didn't call. Not yet. He needed to figure out what he wanted first, what he could offer her that wasn't just inadequate gratitude and crushing guilt. He picked up Tommy from school and tried to act normal, listening to his son's excited description of the art project they'd started, and the funny thing his friend Marcus had said at lunch. Tommy didn't notice his father's distraction, too caught up in his own small joys, and Lucas was grateful for the reprieve. That evening, after Tommy was asleep, Lucas finally let himself look at the news coverage. The announcement had gone out at 3 p.m. as Margaret had promised, and the media had descended like sharks scenting blood. Cross Enterprises CEO resigns. Amid workplace romance scandal, Evelyn. Cross steps down. Following investigation into relationship with employee, corporate giant loses. Leader over fraternization violation. Every headline made it worse. Every article painted Evelyn as either a victim of outdated policies or a predator who'd abused her power, with no nuance or understanding of what had actually happened. Comment sections filled with speculation and judgment, people who'd never met Evelyn making pronouncements about her character and choices. Lucas closed his laptop before he could read anymore, sickened by the public dissection of something private and complicated and real. His phone sat on the coffee table, Evelyn's number glowing in his contacts like a beacon and a warning. Lucas picked it up, put it down, picked it up again. What was he afraid of? That she'd regret her choice? That she'd blame him? That he'd have to face the full weight of what she'd given up? Or was he afraid that she wouldn't regret it, that she'd tell him it was worth it, and he'd have to figure out how to live with being worth someone's entire world? The phone rang in his hand, making him jump. Not Evelyn's number, Daniel's. "Hey," Lucas answered, grateful for the distraction. "Hey yourself. Listen, I'm calling because the office is losing its mind right now. Cross's resignation, the media coverage. Everyone picking sides about whether the board was right to let her go. It's chaos." "I can imagine." "The thing is," Daniel continued, "there's a group of us who think this whole thing is bullshit. That Cross got screwed by policies that don't make sense and investigations that were more about protecting the company than finding the truth. We're thinking about making a statement." Lucas sat up straighter. "What kind of statement?" "A letter to the board, signed by employees at all levels, saying that we don't support what happened, that we think Cross was an excellent CEO who shouldn't have been forced out over a consensual relationship, and that these policies need to be reviewed. Nothing that would risk our jobs, but enough to make it clear that the rank and file aren't okay with this." "That's—" Lucas stopped, overwhelmed. "That's really something, Daniel, but it won't change anything. The board already accepted her resignation." "Maybe not," Daniel agreed, "but it might make a difference to Cross. Might let her know that people appreciated her leadership, that she's not walking away in disgrace, and it might make the board think twice before enforcing these policies so rigidly in the future." Lucas thought about that, about Evelyn receiving a letter signed by dozens or hundreds of employees, about her knowing that her sacrifice hadn't gone unnoticed, that people valued what she'd built and how she'd led. "Count me in," Lucas said. "Whatever you're writing, I want to sign it." "Actually," Daniel said carefully, "we were hoping you might write it. You knew her personally. You can speak to her character in ways the rest of us can't. And frankly, your name on this carries weight. You're the person at the center of the whole thing. If you're willing to publicly support her despite everything that happened, it means something." Lucas's first instinct was to refuse, to stay invisible, and let this blow over without adding fuel to the fire. But then he thought about Evelyn sitting alone in her home, reading articles that painted her as either predator or victim, watching her legacy being debated by people who'd never sat across a desk from her or seen her fight for what mattered. She'd stood up for him. Maybe it was time he stood up for her. "Okay," Lucas said. "I'll write it. Send me what you've got so far, and I'll put something together." After Daniel sent over the draft others had started, Lucas spent 3 hours crafting a letter that tried to capture who Evelyn really was. Not the CEO, not the scandal, but the woman who wrote 23-page briefing documents to help people feel prepared, who listened to 6-year-olds explain dinosaur politics with genuine interest, who'd sacrificed everything rather than let someone else pay the price for loving her. He finished just after midnight, read it through twice, and sent it to Daniel with trembling hands. "To the board of directors of Cross Enterprises, we write as employees who have worked under Evelyn Cross's leadership, some for many years, others more recently. We write not to contest the board's decision, that is your prerogative, but to ensure that Ms. Cross's legacy at this company is accurately represented. Under Ms. Cross's leadership, Cross Enterprises grew significantly in both revenue and reputation. She championed initiatives that improved employee satisfaction, invested in professional development at all levels, and maintained ethical standards that became a model for the industry. She was demanding but fair, visionary but practical, and she led with a combination of intelligence and integrity that inspired loyalty and respect. The investigation into Ms. Cross's personal life has concluded, and the findings were clear: no favoritism, no harassment, no abuse of power. What occurred was a consensual relationship between two adults that violated a company policy. And for this violation, Ms. Cross has paid with her career. We respect the need for professional boundaries and understand the complexity of these situations. However, we believe the outcome in this case was disproportionate to the violation. More importantly, we believe Ms. Cross deserved better than to have her legacy reduced to this moment. Her years of excellent leadership overshadowed by a relationship that caused no actual harm to this company or its employees. We ask the board to consider how these policies might be revised to better reflect the complexity of human relationships while still maintaining appropriate professional standards. We ask that future situations be evaluated with the same nuance and care that Ms. Cross always showed in her leadership. Most importantly, we want Ms. Cross to know that she is valued, respected, and appreciated by those who had the privilege of working under her leadership. She built something meaningful here, and that legacy will endure regardless of how her tenure ended. Respectfully submitted, the letter was followed by signatures. Daniel had collected over 200 in just a few hours, and more were coming in as word spread. Lucas added his name at the top, claiming his place in this stand whether it cost him or not. The next morning, Daniel delivered the letter to the board, and by noon it had leaked to the press, because everything leaked eventually in situations like this. The media coverage shifted slightly, adding complexity to a narrative that had been too simple, too black and white. Some outlets praised the employees for standing up for their leader. Others criticized them for defending a policy violation. But at least the conversation had expanded beyond scandal to include questions about corporate policies, power dynamics, and whether the punishment had fit the crime. Lucas watched it all from his apartment, still unable to bring himself to call Evelyn's number, still wrestling with what he owed her and what he could possibly offer that would be enough. The decision was made for him 3 days later when someone knocked on his apartment door at 7 in the evening. Lucas was cleaning up from dinner. Tommy was building something elaborate with Legos in his room, and Lucas wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door and found Evelyn standing in the hallway. She looked different than she had at the gala, or in her office, or even in the supermarket that first night. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, no makeup hiding the dark circles under her eyes, or the evidence that she'd been crying. She looked real and raw and heartbreakingly beautiful. "Hi," she said softly. "I know I should have called first, but I was afraid if I called you'd tell me not to come, and I needed to see you. Needed to make sure you were okay." Lucas stood frozen in the doorway, his brain struggling to process her presence. Evelyn, you didn't have to." "Can I come in?" she interrupted gently. "Or is this a bad time? If Tommy's here, I don't want to intrude." "He's here," Lucas confirmed, stepping back to let her enter. "But you're not intruding. You could never be intruding." Evelyn walked into his small apartment, and Lucas was suddenly acutely aware of how different it was from her world. The secondhand furniture, the toys scattered across the floor, the crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. But if she noticed or cared, her expression didn't show it. "Dad?" Tommy appeared in the hallway, his face lighting up when he saw their visitor. "Evelyn, you came back!" "But hi, Tommy," Evelyn said, and her smile was genuine, despite the tears Lucas could see threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I heard you're building something cool with Legos. Can I see?" Tommy grabbed her hand and dragged her toward his room, chattering about the spaceship he was constructing, and Lucas followed, watching Evelyn settle onto the floor next to his son, listening with the same careful attention she'd shown the first time she'd visited. After 20 minutes of spaceship explanation, Lucas gently told Tommy it was getting close to bedtime, which earned the expected protests but eventual compliance. Evelyn hugged Tommy goodnight, and Lucas saw his son whisper something to her that made her hug him tighter. Once Tommy was in bed, teeth brushed, story read, door cracked open the way he liked it, Lucas and Evelyn finally faced each other in the living room, all the things they needed to say hanging heavy between them. "I saw the letter," Evelyn said before Lucas could speak. "The one you organized with the other employees. Catherine forwarded it to me." "I should have done more," Lucas said. "Should have fought harder, should have—" "You did exactly enough," Evelyn interrupted. "Lucas, that letter meant more to me than you can possibly know. After weeks of seeing my leadership reduced to a scandal, having 200 people publicly state that I mattered, that what I built mattered." Her voice broke. You gave me that gift. You didn't have to. You gave up your entire career for me, Lucas said, his own voice rough with emotion. I think a letter is the least I could do. Evelyn shook her head. I didn't give up my career for you. I chose what mattered more. There's a difference. How can you say that? Evelyn, you were the CEO of a major corporation. You had power, influence, everything you'd worked for your entire adult life, and you threw it away because of me. No, Evelyn said firmly, stepping closer to him. I walked away from a job that would have required me to sacrifice you to keep it. That's not the same as throwing anything away. That's making a choice about what I value more, a title or the person who makes me want to be more than just a title. Lucas felt tears burning in his eyes. You can't put that on me. The responsibility of being worth your entire world. Evelyn, I'm just a guy, a single dad who shops at Morrison's and can barely afford rent some months. I can't be worth what you gave up. You're not just a guy, Evelyn said, and now she was close enough that Lucas could see every shade of green in her eyes, every tear track on her cheeks. You're the man who stepped in to protect a stranger without asking what it would cost you. You're the father who puts his son first every single day. You're the person who wrote a 23-page briefing document into actual conversation about childhood literacy because you cared about substance over performance. You're the first man in years who looked at me and saw a person instead of a prize or a problem. Don't you dare tell me you're not worth everything I gave up, because you're worth so much more. I love you, Lucas said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. I love you, and I'm terrified of what that means. Terrified that I can't give you back what you gave me. Terrified that someday you'll wake up and realize you traded your legacy for a guy with a second-hand couch and an aging Honda Civic. Evelyn smiled through her tears. I love you too, and I'm terrified for completely different reasons, that you'll realize I'm not actually the powerful, put-together person you think I am. That I'm just someone who's been lonely for so long that I forgot what it felt like to matter to another person. That without my job and my title, I'm not interesting enough to keep your attention. That's impossible, Lucas said immediately. Evelyn, you're the most interesting person I've ever met. The job was just window dressing. You are... He stopped, searching for adequate words. You're everything, with or without Cross Enterprises, with or without the CEO title. You're everything. Evelyn kissed him then, and it was different from the kiss at the gala, less performance, more promise. It tasted like tears and hope, and the beginning of something that didn't require lies or pretending. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn rested her forehead against his. What happens now? She whispered. I don't have a job. You're going back to yours. We're starting over from scratch. We figure it out, Lucas said. Together. No titles, no lies, no pretending, just us trying to build something real. I don't know how to be just me, Evelyn admitted. I've been a CEO for so long, I'm not sure I remember who I am without it. Then we'll figure that out too, Lucas promised. Besides, Tommy seems to think you're pretty great just as you are. And 6-year-olds are excellent judges of character. Evelyn laughed, the sound still wet with tears but genuine. What did he whisper to me earlier, when I was saying goodnight? Lucas smiled. He said, I'm glad you came back. Dad smiles more when you're around. He's observant. He's honest, Lucas corrected. Kids always are. And he's right. I do smile more when you're around. Even when everything else is falling apart, you make me want to smile. They stood in Lucas's small living room, holding each other while outside Chicago moved through its evening routines, while somewhere Marcus Cross was probably celebrating his victory, while the board of Cross Enterprises searched for Evelyn's replacement. None of it mattered in this moment. All that mattered was this. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who'd lost everything and gained something infinitely more valuable, who were brave enough to choose love over security. Stay, Lucas said quietly. Tonight, just stay. We don't have to figure out the future right now. We can just be here, together, and let that be enough for now. Evelyn nodded against his chest. Okay? Yes, I'd like that. They moved to the couch, still holding each other, and talked deep into the night about everything and nothing. Evelyn told him about the exit interview with the board, about clearing out her office, about the strange sensation of suddenly having endless time and no idea how to fill it. Lucas told her about the weeks of administrative leave, about Tommy's questions, about the crushing weight of being saved at such a terrible cost. "I need you to understand something," Evelyn said as midnight approached. "I don't regret what I did, not even for a second. The job was killing me slowly, turning me into someone I didn't recognize, demanding sacrifices I didn't want to make. You gave me an excuse to walk away from that. You gave me permission to want something more than power." "What do you want now?" Lucas asked. Evelyn smiled. "I want to sleep past 6 a.m. I want to read books that aren't business theory. I want to spend time with you and Tommy without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I want to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for board members or investors or journalists. I want a life instead of just a career." "That sounds perfect," Lucas said honestly. "It sounds terrifying," Evelyn corrected, "but also exciting. And I want to be terrified and excited with you, if you'll have me." "Always," Lucas promised, "for as long as you want." They fell asleep on the couch together, wrapped around each other like lifelines. And for the first time in 6 weeks, Lucas slept without nightmares about losing everything. Because the truth was, he'd already lost and gained and lost again. And what remained was this: real, imperfect, beautiful, worth fighting for. When morning came, Tommy found them still tangled together, and rather than being confused or upset, he simply climbed onto the couch between them and declared it was pancake morning. Evelyn, rumpled and makeup-free and more beautiful than Lucas had ever seen her, agreed immediately, and the three of them moved to the kitchen to make breakfast together. It wasn't the ending Lucas had imagined when he'd stood in that supermarket dairy aisle and agreed to be Evelyn's fake boyfriend. It was better and worse and more complicated than any story he could have written. But it was real, and it was theirs, and for now, that was more than enough. The next 3 months taught Lucas Warren that rebuilding a life was messier, harder, and more beautiful than any story suggested it should be. He returned to Cross Enterprises the following Monday as promised, walking into the building with his reinstated employee badge and the strange sensation of being both vindicated and exposed. The whispers followed him through the lobby, up the elevator, across the 23rd floor to his cubicle. Some people offered supportive nods, others avoided his eyes entirely, and a few looked at him with open curiosity, like he was a fascinating specimen they couldn't quite categorize. Daniel met him at his desk with coffee and a sympathetic expression. "Welcome back to the circus," Daniel said. "Fair warning, about half the office thinks you're a hero who stood up for love, and the other half thinks you're the guy who cost us our best CEO. It's very dramatic." "Fantastic," Lucas muttered, logging into his computer and finding approximately 400 unread emails waiting for him. "Just what I needed." "For what it's worth," Daniel added quietly, "the people whose opinions actually matter are in the hero camp. The rest are just jealous that they're not brave enough to take risks like you did." Lucas wasn't sure he'd call what he did brave, desperate maybe, or reckless, or just helplessly drawn to a woman who'd looked terrified in a supermarket, but he appreciated the support anyway. The work itself was almost comforting in its familiarity. Spreadsheets and projections and quarterly reports didn't care about scandals or resignations or hearts broken and mended. Numbers followed logical patterns, provided clear answers, demanded nothing more than careful analysis and accurate calculations. Lucas threw himself into it, grateful for tasks that didn't require him to examine his feelings or justify his choices. But evenings were different. Evenings belonged to Evelyn and Tommy and the strange new family they were building from spare parts and hope. Evelyn had taken an apartment 3 blocks from Lucas's place, close enough to be present, far enough to maintain some independence while they figured out what this relationship looked like without the pressure of corporate policies or public scrutiny. She showed up most evenings around dinner time, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes bringing takeout, always bringing herself in a way that felt both precious and ordinary. Tommy adored her with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who'd decided someone was family. He showed her his homework, explained the complex social dynamics of first-grade friendships, taught her how to properly construct a Lego spaceship. Evelyn listened to all of it with the same serious attention she'd once given to board presentations, and Lucas would watch them together and feel something dangerous and wonderful expand in his chest. Dad says you used to be really important, Tommy said one evening while they were making spaghetti together. Like boss of lots of people important. Evelyn glanced at Lucas, who was stirring sauce and trying not to eavesdrop, obviously. I was the boss of a company, Evelyn confirmed. But I'm not anymore. Why not? Tommy asked with characteristic directness. Because I wanted to spend more time with people I care about instead of working all the time, Evelyn said simply. Sometimes being really important at work means you can't be really present at home. I decided home was more important. Tommy considered this seriously. That's good. Dad works a lot, but he always comes to my school stuff and makes dinner and does bedtime. You got to do the important things, not just the work things. You're very wise, Tommy Warren, Evelyn said, ruffling his hair. Your dad is lucky to have you. I know, Tommy agreed cheerfully. He tells me that all the time. Oh, later, after Tommy was asleep and Lucas and Evelyn were sharing wine on the couch, cheap wine from the supermarket, not the expensive bottles Evelyn used to stock in her office, she brought up something that had clearly been weighing on her. I've been thinking about what comes next, she said quietly. For me, I mean. Professionally. Lucas had been waiting for this conversation, knowing it would come eventually. Evelyn Cross wasn't the type of person who could be idle indefinitely, no matter how much she claimed to be enjoying the break. What are you thinking? He asked. Consulting, maybe? Or starting something smaller, more focused? I've had 3 different companies reach out asking if I'd be interested in advisory positions. Nothing full-time, just strategic guidance. And there's a nonprofit focused on women's advancement in business that's been courting me for years. I always said I was too busy, but now, she trailed off, uncertain in a way Lucas rarely saw from her. Now you have time, Lucas finished, and the question is how you want to spend it. Exactly. Evelyn took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. I don't want to jump into something just because it's available or because I'm afraid of being irrelevant, but I also don't want to waste whatever skills and experience I've built. There has to be a middle ground between CEO workaholic and unemployed person who's lost her identity. Lucas set down his own glass and took her hand, threading their fingers together. What if you gave yourself permission to experiment? Try the consulting thing on a limited basis, see how it feels. Volunteer with the nonprofit, test whether you actually enjoy that kind of work. You don't have to commit to a whole new career path tomorrow. You can just try things and see what fits. Evelyn looked at him with something like wonder. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, Lucas corrected, but it's doable. One step at a time. That's how I've survived the past 3 years. Not by having all the answers, just by taking the next logical step and trusting I'd figure out the rest as I went. And if I make mistakes? Evelyn asked quietly. If I choose wrong? Then you choose differently next time. Evelyn, you're not on trial anymore. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest about what you want and brave enough to pursue it. She kissed him then, soft and grateful, and Lucas thought about how strange it was that he, the guy who'd been terrified of every major decision since his wife left, had somehow become the voice of encouragement for a woman who'd run a corporation. But maybe that was the gift of their relationship. They balanced each other. Where Evelyn overthought and overanalyzed, Lucas could offer perspective. Where Lucas doubted and hesitated, Evelyn could provide confidence. Together, they were stronger than either of them had been alone. The complications came, as they always did, from outside their small sphere of home and family. 6 weeks after Evelyn's resignation, Marcus Cross filed a lawsuit alleging that Evelyn had violated their divorce settlement by engaging in behavior that damaged the company's reputation, and by extension, devalued his remaining shares. It was a transparent attempt at revenge dressed up as legitimate legal action, but it was effective nonetheless, dragging Evelyn back into court, back into the headlines, back into the role of scandal rather than leader. Lucas learned about it when Daniel showed him the Tribune article during their lunch break. This is garbage, Daniel said, sliding his phone across the table. Everyone knows Cross is just bitter that she moved on, but it's still going to be a mess for her. Lucas read the article with mounting fury. The lawsuit claimed emotional damages, reputational harm, loss of potential future earnings. It painted Evelyn as reckless and irresponsible, suggested her relationship with Lucas had been part of a pattern of poor judgment that had ultimately harmed Marcus's financial interests. I need to talk to her, Lucas said, already standing. He called Evelyn from the parking lot, and when she answered, he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "You saw the news," she said. It wasn't a question. "I saw it. Evelyn, this is my fault. If I testify, if I explain to the court that our relationship wasn't reckless or irresponsible—" "No," Evelyn interrupted firmly. "Lucas, you are not getting dragged into another legal proceeding because of me. You've already paid too high a price for this relationship." "And you've paid higher," Lucas shot back. "Let me help. Let me do something other than stand on the sidelines while Marcus tries to destroy you." There was a long pause, and Lucas could almost hear Evelyn's mind working through scenarios and strategies. "My lawyers don't think he has a case," she said finally. "The divorce settlement has clauses about both parties being responsible for their own reputations post-divorce. Marcus is grasping at straws, trying to create leverage for a better financial settlement. If we ignore him, if we don't give him the public battle he wants, his case will likely collapse under its own weight." "And if it doesn't?" Lucas pressed. "Then I have excellent lawyers and resources to fight this for as long as it takes," Evelyn said. "But I refuse to let Marcus turn you into a weapon he can use against me. You've been hurt enough by our relationship. I won't allow you to be hurt more." Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to insist he was strong enough to handle whatever Marcus threw at him, but he recognized the steel in Evelyn's voice, the CEO voice, the one that had built an empire and negotiated billion-dollar deals. When Evelyn used that voice, arguing was pointless. "Fine," he conceded. "But if you change your mind, if you need me to testify or make a statement or anything, you'll be the first person I call," Evelyn promised. "Now go back to work before Margaret notices you're taking extended lunch breaks to call your girlfriend. Some scandals we can avoid." Despite everything, Lucas smiled. "I love you. I love you too, even when you're being stubborn and protective." "Pretty sure that's my line," Lucas said, and he could hear Evelyn's laugh as he hung up. The lawsuit dragged on for weeks, generating headlines and speculation, but no actual movement toward trial. Marcus's lawyers filed motions. Evelyn's lawyers filed counter-motions, and the legal system ground forward with the speed of continental drift. Through it all, Evelyn maintained her composure publicly, while privately admitting to Lucas that the stress was wearing her down. "I thought leaving Cross Enterprises would mean leaving this kind of fight behind," she confessed one night, curled against Lucas on his worn couch while Tommy slept peacefully down the hall. "But Marcus won't let go. He can't stand that I'm happy without him, that I chose you over the empire we built together." "Maybe that's exactly why he's doing this," Lucas suggested gently. "Because you being happy proves he was wrong about you, about what you needed, about everything he believed your relationship was supposed to be." Evelyn tilted her head to look at him. "When did you become so wise about toxic ex-spouses?" "I'm not," Lucas admitted. "But I know what it's like to watch someone you loved walk away from everything you built together. Sarah did that to me. The difference is I eventually realized she was right. We'd built something that didn't fit either of us anymore. Marcus can't accept that truth about you two, so he's fighting to rewrite the narrative." "How did you get past the anger?" Evelyn asked. "At Sarah, I mean. How did you stop being furious that she left?" Lucas thought about that for a long moment. "Tommy," he said finally. "I couldn't stay angry at Sarah and be the father Tommy needed. The anger took up too much space, required too much energy, so I chose to let it go, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace." Evelyn was quiet for a while, processing that. Then she said, "I want to let go of the anger at Marcus. I want to stop caring what he does or says or sues me for, but I don't know how to get there when he keeps pulling me back into battle." "Then maybe you need to decide what peace looks like for you," Lucas suggested. "What would have to happen for you to feel free of him? Not just legally free, but emotionally free?" Evelyn closed her eyes, considering. "I think I'd need to build something that's completely mine, something he had no part in creating, something he can't touch or claim or devalue. Proof that I don't need his name or his company or his validation to matter." "Then do that," Lucas said simply. "Build something new. Not because Marcus is watching, but because you deserve to create on your own terms." 2 days later, Evelyn called Lucas with an excitement in her voice he hadn't heard in months. "I had lunch with Diane Morrison," she said without preamble. "From the Anderson Foundation. Remember her from the gala?" The literacy woman who loved talking to me about Tommy's school, Lucas recalled. What about her? She offered me a position on their board, and she asked if I'd be interested in starting a new initiative focused on business mentorship for women from low-income backgrounds. Teaching practical skills, making connections, creating pathways into corporate careers. It would be part consulting, part nonprofit work, completely independent from anything Marcus touched. Lucas, I think I want to do it. The joy in her voice made Lucas's chest ache in the best way. Then you should absolutely do it. It won't pay what I made at Cross Enterprises, Evelyn warned. The consulting brings in decent money, but the foundation work is mostly volunteer. I'd have to be careful about budgeting, maybe even downsize my apartment eventually. Welcome to how the other half lives, Lucas teased. We have store brand cereal and streaming services we share passwords for. It's very glamorous. Evelyn laughed. I'm serious, Lucas. This would be a major lifestyle change. Less money, less prestige, more actual hands-on work. I'd be building something from scratch with limited resources. It's risky. It's also exactly what you need, Lucas said firmly. Something that's yours. Something meaningful. Something that proves you don't need a CEO title to matter. Do it, Evelyn. Take the risk. She did. Within a month, she'd accepted the board position and begun developing the mentorship program, which she named Catalyst Collective after rejecting approximately 24 other options as either too corporate or too casual. Lucas watched her transform as the work consumed her attention. Not the unhealthy, obsessive consumption of her CEO days, but engaged, passionate focus on building something she believed in. She recruited mentors from her extensive business network, secured initial funding from several sources, including a surprisingly generous donation from the Cross Enterprises Employee Fund, a pointed message from the people who'd signed Lucas's letter, and started accepting applications from young women who wanted guidance navigating the business world. The first cohort was 12 women, ages 19 to 24, from backgrounds that had given them limited access to professional networks or insider knowledge. Evelyn met with each of them individually, paired them with mentors, organized workshops on everything from resume writing to salary negotiation to recognizing and reporting workplace harassment. Lucas attended one of the workshops and watched Evelyn in her element, commanding the room not with CEO authority, but with genuine expertise and hard-won wisdom. She told stories about her own failures and successes, answered questions with brutal honesty, and created space for these young women to dream bigger than their circumstances had previously allowed. Afterward, one of the participants approached Lucas while Evelyn was talking to another group. "You're her boyfriend, right?" the young woman asked. "I saw the articles when everything went down with Cross Enterprises." Lucas braced himself for judgment or inappropriate questions, but instead she smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you," she continued. "Because of what happened with you two, Ms. Cross started this program, and this program might change my entire life. So whatever people say about the scandal, or the resignation, or any of it, you should know it led to something really good." Lucas found Evelyn later and relayed the conversation. She cried, just a little, the kind of tears that came from being seen and valued in ways that transcended corporate titles or public opinion. "This is what I was supposed to be doing all along," Evelyn said quietly, "not managing profit margins and shareholder expectations. This, helping people build better futures. Why did it take me so long to figure that out?" "Because you had to get here the long way," Lucas said, "through Cross Enterprises and Marcus and all the hard lessons. If you'd started here, you wouldn't have the experience and connections to make it work. Everything that happened had to happen for you to end up exactly where you're supposed to be." "That's either very wise or very convenient rationalization," Evelyn observed. "Can it be both?" Lucas asked, and Evelyn laughed, the sound free and genuine and utterly unguarded. Marcus's lawsuit was dismissed 4 months after it was filed, the judge ruling that Marcus had failed to demonstrate any actual financial harm resulting from Evelyn's personal relationship. The dismissal came with language strongly suggesting that the suit had been frivolous and potentially filed in bad faith, which Evelyn's lawyers assured her meant Marcus would think very carefully before attempting similar legal harassment in the future. The news broke on a Friday evening, and Lucas came home to find Evelyn and Tommy making celebration cupcakes in his kitchen, flour everywhere, and frosting in places frosting should definitely not be. We're celebrating freedom from mean ex-husbands, Tommy explained seriously, wielding a spatula with alarming enthusiasm. Evelyn says we get to put extra sprinkles on because it's a special occasion. Extra sprinkles sounds appropriate, Lucas agreed, kissing Evelyn on the cheek and stealing a fingerful of frosting. How are you feeling? Lighter, Evelyn said simply. Like I've been carrying something heavy for months and someone finally took it away. Marcus can't hurt me anymore, Lucas. He doesn't have that power over my life. He never should have had it in the first place, Lucas said, but I'm glad you're free of it now. They ate cupcakes with excessive sprinkles and watched a movie that Tommy chose, something animated involving talking animals and improbable adventures. And Lucas thought about how this was his life now. This beautiful, messy, ordinary life with a woman he loved and a son who made everything better, and cupcakes on Friday nights because they could. It wasn't the life he'd imagined when he stood in Morrison's supermarket 7 months ago, frozen between milk brands and complicated decisions. It was infinitely better. Winter turned to spring, and with it came small milestones that felt monumental. Tommy's 7th birthday party, where Evelyn organized games with the efficiency of someone who'd managed corporate events, but the enthusiasm of someone experiencing a children's party for the first time. Lucas's promotion to senior analyst, which came with a modest raise, and Daniel's insistence that it was long overdue and had nothing to do with the scandal. Evelyn's mentorship program expanding to a second cohort of 15 women, with a waiting list that suggested she'd tapped into something people desperately needed. They settled into rhythms: Sunday morning pancakes, Wednesday evening walks along the lakeshore, Saturday afternoons when Evelyn would show up with art supplies or science kits or whatever she decided Tommy needed to expand his education beyond school curriculum. Lucas's apartment became their de facto gathering place, though Evelyn still maintained her own space for when she needed solitude or intensive work time. It wasn't perfect. They argued about things: Evelyn's tendency to overschedule, Lucas's reluctance to accept help even when he needed it, how to balance Tommy's needs with their own relationship. But they argued, and then they talked, and then they figured it out, together, like adults who'd learned that love was choosing each other, even when it was hard. 7 months after the gala, 8 months after that first supermarket encounter, Lucas took Tommy and Evelyn on a weekend trip to Wisconsin. Just a small cabin by a lake, nothing fancy, but it was the first time the three of them had gone away together. The first time they'd tested whether they could be a family unit outside the familiar territory of Lucas's apartment. Tommy spent the weekend catching frogs and building sandcastles and explaining to Evelyn why superheroes needed secret identities. Evelyn spent it reading books she'd been meaning to get to for years, swimming in the lake despite the cold water, and finally, fully relaxing in a way Lucas hadn't seen since before the investigation. On their last evening, after Tommy was asleep in the cabin's tiny second bedroom, Lucas and Evelyn sat on the dock watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I've been thinking, Evelyn said quietly, her hand finding Lucas's in the fading light. Dangerous activity, Lucas teased. I'm serious. She turned to look at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. I know we've been taking things slow, figuring out what this relationship looks like without the pressure and the scandal, but I think I'm ready to stop being slow. I think I'm ready for us to be something more permanent. Lucas's heart kicked against his ribs. More permanent how? Move in together, Evelyn said. My lease is up in 2 months. Instead of renewing, I could move in with you and Tommy, or we could find a bigger place together, somewhere that's ours from the start. I know it's a big step, and I know Tommy has to be comfortable with it. But Lucas, I want to build a life with you, not a relationship we maintain across 3 blocks, but an actual shared life. What do you think? Lucas thought about waking up next to Evelyn every morning, about her being there for every homework crisis and bedtime story, about building something permanent and real, and theirs, about Tommy having a constant presence beyond just Lucas, someone else who showed up and stayed and loved him unconditionally. I think, Lucas said carefully, that we need to ask Tommy. Because if we do this, we're not just changing my life and yours. We're changing his. He gets a vote. Fair enough, Evelyn agreed. When do you want to talk to him? Tomorrow morning, Lucas decided. Over pancakes. Everything important in our family happens over pancakes. So the next morning, while Tommy was drowning his pancakes in syrup and explaining the complex rules of the card game he'd invented, Lucas cleared his throat. "Buddy, Evelyn and I need to talk to you about something important." Tommy looked up, suddenly serious. "Are you guys getting married?" Lucas nearly choked on his coffee. "What? No, not yet. Where did that come from?" "My friend Mia says when grown-ups want to talk about something important, it usually means marriage or someone dying," Tommy explained matter-of-factly. "And nobody looks sad, so I figured marriage." Evelyn bit back a smile. "Not marriage yet, Tommy, but we do want to talk about living together. How would you feel if Evelyn moved in with us? Or if we all moved to a bigger place together?" Tommy considered this with the gravity of someone rendering a life-altering verdict. Then he said, "Would Evelyn still make the good mac and cheese?" "The good mac and cheese would be a regular occurrence," Evelyn confirmed, completely serious. "And would I still get my own room?" "Absolutely," Lucas assured him. "That's non-negotiable." "And would you guys be happy?" Tommy asked, looking between them with those two wise eyes that sometimes made Lucas forget his son was only 7. "Yes," Lucas and Evelyn said together. Tommy shrugged. "Then, okay. Evelyn should definitely move in, but I get to help pick the new place if we move, because I have opinions about bathrooms." "You have opinions about bathrooms?" Evelyn asked, charmed. "Very strong opinions," Tommy confirmed. "They're important. People don't think about bathrooms enough when picking houses." They spent the drive back to Chicago discussing Tommy's bathroom criteria and looking at apartment listings on Evelyn's phone and planning a future that felt simultaneously terrifying and exactly right. 2 months later, they moved into a 3-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that split the difference between Lucas's old place and Evelyn's, with good schools and a park nearby and bathrooms that met Tommy's exacting standards. It was chaotic and exhausting and involved approximately 800 boxes and a minor crisis when they couldn't find Tommy's stuffed elephant for 3 hours. But when everything was finally unpacked and Tommy was asleep in his new room and Lucas and Evelyn collapsed onto their new couch in their new living room, Lucas felt something settle in his chest. This was home. Not the apartment specifically, but this. The 3 of them together, building something permanent from the fragments of their separate lives. "We did it," Evelyn said, her head on Lucas's shoulder. "We actually built something real out of a fake relationship in a supermarket." "Best fake relationship I ever had," Lucas agreed. "Only fake relationship you ever had," Evelyn corrected. "True, but still the best." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both too tired to move, both too content to care. "Lucas," Evelyn said quietly. "Thank you for saying yes that night in Morrison's. Thank you for protecting me when you didn't have to, for standing by me when it cost you everything, for building this life with me when you could have walked away a dozen different times." Lucas shifted so he could see her face, so she could see the absolute truth in his eyes when he said, "I never wanted to walk away. Not once. You were worth every risk, every complication, every hard moment. You still are." Evelyn kissed him, soft and sure, and Lucas tasted 7 months of history in that kiss. Supermarket desperation and gala romance and investigation heartbreak and lawsuit stress, and finally, wonderfully, home. The official announcement came 2 weeks after they moved in together. Cross Enterprises released a statement acknowledging that their investigation into the relationship between former CEO Evelyn Cross and employee Lucas Warren had concluded with findings of no professional misconduct, that both parties had conducted themselves with integrity throughout the process, and that the company wished them both well in their future endeavors. It was corporate speak for "we're closing this chapter," and it came with the quiet suggestion that everyone could stop speculating now because there was nothing left to speculate about. The media coverage was minimal. A few business journals mentioning it in their roundup of industry news, 1 or 2 gossip sites acknowledging the update. But for Lucas and Evelyn, it felt like the final door closing on a painful chapter. Cross Enterprises had officially absolved them, validated their relationship, confirmed what they'd known all along, that love wasn't a violation and choosing each other hadn't been wrong. 6 months after moving in together, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday evening while Tommy was at his friend's house for a sleepover, Lucas asked Evelyn to marry him. He didn't do it with an elaborate plan or a public gesture. He did it in their living room after dinner while they were loading the dishwasher and arguing amiably about whether forks went up or down in the silverware basket. Down is obviously more efficient, Evelyn insisted. Up is safer, Lucas countered. Nobody gets stabbed reaching for a clean fork. Who's getting stabbed by silverware in their own kitchen? People in horror movies, Lucas said. It's a documented risk. Evelyn laughed, that genuine, unguarded sound Lucas had fallen in love with, and suddenly he couldn't wait another second. Marry me, he said. Evelyn froze, fork suspended halfway to the dishwasher. What? Marry me, Lucas repeated, setting down the plate he'd been holding and taking her hands. I don't have a ring yet because I'm an idiot who didn't plan this. And I know we said we were taking things slow, but Evelyn, I don't want slow anymore. I want forever. I want to build a whole life with you, not just a shared apartment. I want Tommy to have you as his mother in every way that matters. I want to wake up next to you every day for the rest of my life and argue about silverware placement and make terrible dad jokes and be the person you choose, every day, the way you're the person I choose. So marry me. Please. Evelyn's eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling, that brilliant, uncontrolled smile that transformed her entire face. Yes, she said. Yes, obviously, yes. You insane, wonderful man. Yes. They kissed in their kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and half-loaded dishwasher, and the beautifully ordinary life they'd built together. And Lucas thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a supermarket dairy aisle to this moment, from fake boyfriend to real fiancé, from desperate protection to deep love. They told Tommy the next day, over pancakes as was their tradition for important family conversations. So you guys are getting married, Tommy said, not sounding remotely surprised. Mia's going to be so excited. She predicted this months ago. Mia seems to predict a lot of things, Lucas observed. She's very smart, Tommy said seriously. Can I be in the wedding? Mia says usually kids get to be ring bearers or flower people or something. You can absolutely be in the wedding, Evelyn assured him. What role would you like? Tommy thought about it. Can I explain to people about the bathrooms? Because this is kind of about our house, and the bathrooms were my idea. I'm not sure wedding ceremonies traditionally include bathroom commentary, Lucas said carefully. Then we'll make it a tradition, Tommy declared with the confidence of someone who'd never met a tradition he couldn't improve. The wedding was small and perfect, held 8 months later in the same park near their apartment where Tommy played on weekends. Just family and close friends. Daniel and his family, Catherine, who'd become a good friend to Evelyn post-Cross Enterprises. Mrs. Chen, who'd watched Tommy through all the chaos and had earned her place as honorary grandmother. The first cohort of women from Catalyst Collective who'd asked if they could attend because Evelyn had changed their lives. Tommy did not ultimately give a speech about bathrooms, but he did serve as ring bearer with great seriousness and only dropped the rings once. Evelyn wore a simple ivory dress and looked more beautiful than Lucas had ever seen her. Lucas wore the suit Philippe had fitted him for the gala. It still fit, miraculously, and felt like he was stepping into the life he'd always been meant to live. When they exchanged vows, Lucas promised to always say yes when Evelyn needed protecting, to be her partner in building something meaningful, to love her without conditions or reservations for the rest of his life. Evelyn promised to choose him every day, to build a life based on love instead of titles, to be the mother Tommy deserved and the wife Lucas needed. They kissed while their small gathering cheered, and Lucas tasted his entire future in that kiss. Years of ordinary days and extraordinary moments, challenges they'd face together, and joys they'd share. A life built on the foundation of choosing each other despite every obstacle. The reception was in their apartment, casual and warm and exactly what they wanted. No hired caterers or crystal chandeliers, just potluck dishes from friends and music from a playlist and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to slightly inappropriate. Daniel's was both. I've known Lucas for 4 years, he said, raising his glass, and I've never seen him take a risk on anything. He's the guy who reads every product review before buying dish soap, who keeps spreadsheets tracking his expenses to the penny, who plans everything 6 weeks in advance. So when he tells me he agreed to be the fake boyfriend of his CEO in a supermarket on a random Wednesday night, I think he's lost his mind. Turns out he'd actually found it. Or found her anyway. To Lucas and Evelyn. May you continue making impulsive decisions that work out impossibly well." The toast got laughs and tears and heartfelt agreement, and Lucas pulled Evelyn close, grateful for this life, this love, this family they'd built from lies that became truth. Later, after the guests had left and Tommy was asleep in his room and the apartment was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the city outside, Lucas and Evelyn stood at their bedroom window looking out at Chicago. "Do you ever think about that night in Morrison's?" Evelyn asked quietly. "About what would have happened if you'd said no?" "All the time," Lucas admitted. "I think about how close we came to never knowing each other. How one different choice would have meant I'd still be alone, you'd still be trapped in a job that was killing you, Tommy wouldn't have you. It's terrifying how much hangs on single moments." "I'm glad you said yes," Evelyn said, "even though it cost us both so much. Even though it was messy and hard in public, I'm glad you took that risk." "Me too," Lucas said. "Best risk I ever took." They stood together in the comfortable silence of people who'd learned each other's rhythms, who'd built something real from impossible circumstances, who'd chosen love over safety and found that love was the safest place after all. Years later, when people asked how they'd met, Lucas and Evelyn would tell the truth, that they'd met in a supermarket dairy aisle, that she'd needed a fake boyfriend to escape her ex-husband, that he'd agreed without thinking about the consequences, and that the lie they'd told together had become the most honest thing in both their lives. Tommy, whenever he heard the story, would add his own commentary about bathrooms and the importance of making good first impressions, and how sometimes the best families were the ones you built rather than the ones you were born into. And Lucas would hold Evelyn's hand, the hand he'd first held between milk coolers and frozen foods, the hand that had trembled with fear and then with love. And think about how a single moment of saying yes had given him everything he'd never known to ask for. No titles, no lies, no pretending. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and been brave enough to build something real from the fragments of their separate lives. Just love, honest and hard-won and worth every sacrifice. Just home, finally, with the person who made everywhere feel like exactly where he belonged.